Soft Boy awakens his power to obliterate the god of dragons. In this world, dragons are magical and powerful creatures with ancient lineage, true predators, and natural enemies of humans. Because of this, there are dragon hunters who make a living by accepting missions to kill these creatures and protect the cities. There are two ways to do this. The first is by freezing the dragon's blood with silver, an aura that emanates from silver weapons. And the second way is simply letting the sunlight burn their bodies. The anime begins by showing Ragna, one of these dragon hunters, emanating silver from his own hand to freeze several dragons with just one touch. Despite having this immense power, he desired to be even more powerful, showing that he was never satisfied. However, all of this was just a vision of the boy who was in the middle of training, trying to face a dragon with little result, which was a terrible time to have visions. Realizing that Ragna was having difficulties, his partner Leonica steps between him and the creature, easily finishing off the dragon. Leo tells him that he needs to stay more focused during battles as she does, and Ragna thanks her for her help by patting the girl on the head. Next, they burn the dragon's body and freeze its heart with silver, completing the job. When they return to the city, we see that Leo is considered a prodigy for having killed dozens of dragons alone, being the best hunter in the city of Ranabera, responsible for killing most of the creatures there despite being only 12 years old. Everyone envied and admired the girl, giving her various nicknames, but for Ragna, her only loyal partner, she is a hero whom he is sure will become even stronger as she grows up, and he takes several photos of his little heroine to document her growth. However, unlike Leo, Ragna had no ability to hunt dragons, which led some people to mock their partnership, like Sykes Charluk, ranked as the second best dragon hunter, with the highest number of creature kills in the city after Leo, which disappoints him because the girl didn't even know who he was. Sykes tells Ragna that he is only slowing down his partner, as his abilities are well below average, calling him nothing more than a burden. However, Leo immediately draws her sword, pointing it at Sykes to defend Ragna, leaving the hunter speechless. Leo asks him what he seeks with his silver sword and how much he desires to achieve what he wants, explaining that she seeks to have maximum strength, become stronger than anyone or anything. Because of this goal, she became a dragon hunter, as dragons are the most powerful creatures of all, and to prove that she is indeed the strongest, she wishes to face even the feared dragon god. She then asks all the people in the area if anyone wants to join her, promising to share everything they desire, such as wealth, status, and even glory. However, everyone remains silent and only Ragna speaks up, swearing to follow her as long as he can. Although she just delivered a speech worthy of the #1 dragon hunter, showing experience and determination when speaking with her partner, it becomes clear that she is still a 12-year-old girl. Even though she is a prodigy, there are still simple things that every child has, like wanting to sleep without taking a bath. At night, Ragna puts her to bed and lets her sleep peacefully while he goes to train, as his greatest desire is to become at least somewhat useful to Leo before he dies. He knows that, as he has no talent for hunting, he will never come close to her level, and he is certain that he will die at the hands of a dragon, but he wants to help her in some way before his departure. However, at that moment, he sees the figure of a man who tells him that he will never fulfill his wish of being useful to Leo because he will lose her before that happens. Then Ragna starts having visions of the city in flames, being attacked by multiple dragons, and shortly after, he sees his worst nightmare, the girl being killed by one of the creatures. Seconds later, he wakes up, realizing that he had fallen asleep while training, but is still scared by the fact that he can still hear the voice of the strange man in his head, saying that her time was near. The next day, Ragna goes shopping to cook whatever Leo wants, fulfilling all her wishes, making the girl very happy. Later, after eating the meat she craved, she falls asleep and Ragna puts her to bed as he did the previous night. In the morning, the two go to the guild hall where dragon hunters accept their missions. However, they are surprised to find that there is not a single task available that day because the city has not had many dragon attacks recently. So Leo and Ragna go outside for some fresh air, and Ragna notices that her hair has grown. He decides to take advantage of the free time to cut her hair, but while doing so, he remembers the nightmare he had about her. To make matters worse, that night he has the same horrible dream again and decides to spend the early hours of the morning training. However, even there he cannot find peace as he continues to hear the voice of the strange man telling him that he will lose Leo soon. Later, at a bar in the city, the dragon hunters gather to discuss the strange fact that winged creatures have been disappearing from the city for a few days. One of them mentions that the dragons were migrating eastward towards a city called Donapieru, a place that has not been attacked by them in a decade. Leo overhears the conversation and once again acts like a 12-year-old, mentioning that the city Donapieru reminds her of a famous confectionery shop called the Silver Hen, and suggests that if they go there on a mission to hunt dragons, they should take the opportunity to visit the shop and try its food. Meanwhile, Ragnar still cannot shake the dream from his mind, fearing the words of the strange man and wondering if he is a vision or a ghost, feeling that he is neither of those options. Leo notices his partner's concern and asks him why he has been working so hard lately. He replies that it is an attempt to help her in some way. Recognizing his concern for her, Leo recalls the day they first met, saying that when she saw him for the first time, she thought they had the same potential and the same level of strength. This surprises him because, apart from having no natural talent, he was still getting beaten up when they first met. However, although she admits that Ragna indeed has no natural ability to be a dragon hunter as she does, she says that her instincts tell her that he will become very strong somehow, though she cannot say when or why. Therefore, she promises to protect Ragna until that day comes. In a flashback, we learn about Ragna's past. His parents were eaten by dragons when he was only 3 years old, leaving him an orphan. Some relatives took him in, but shortly afterward, they too were killed by dragons, leaving Ragna with no one. That's when he was bought by a wealthy man, but some dragons burned down his property, leading him to believe that he was cursed. The rich man who bought him and his friends also blamed the boy's bad luck for what happened. They beat Ragna, accusing him of working for the dragons because wherever he went, dragons appeared shortly afterward, leaving only him as the survivor. Just when he had lost all hope of finding peace, he met Leo, who invited him to become a dragon hunter alongside her. She explained that having a special connection with these creatures was not a bad thing when you were hunting them, especially if you survived the fight. So she decided that he would be her partner that day, even though he was worried about bringing his bad luck to her and making Leo end up like all the others who had been close to him. However, she told him that only the weak died for her and the strongest, stronger than the dragons, survived. Since she was very strong, he had nothing to worry about. To prove his potential to Ragna, she took him on one of her hunts, and when they found a dragon, the boy thought it was the end for both of them. However, Leo defeated the dragon with a single blow, proving that she was indeed very strong. This made Ragna believe that it was safe to be near her because, unlike the others, he could not imagine a way for someone like her to die before him. From that day on, they became inseparable partners, with Ragna thinking that he was no longer cursed by being alongside a hero like Leo, wishing to stay by her side until he eventually died at the hands of a dragon. That's why the nightmare of losing her that he couldn't stop having was so terrifying, as she meant everything to him. The next day at the guild hall, all the dragon hunters gather when they learn that the city of Piero has been attacked and destroyed by the dragons. Since they hadn't suffered any dragon attacks for a decade, they thought they didn't need hunters to protect them. There, Leo asks Sykes what happened, and he explains that he heard that a horde of dragons attacked the city of Piero, and that's why the kingdom issued an emergency mission for all hunters to go after these dragons. This makes Ragna panic because he knows that this means his vision is about to come true. But when he tries to warn Leo about the impending danger, they hear a noise, and when they leave the guild hall, they see the city in flames and the dragon horde attacking, making Ragna recognize the similarity of the scene to his dream. Desperate, he goes after her, while the dragons attack the people who try to resist the attack in vain. Then the men see a person emerging from the flames and go to check if they are injured. However, the blood-covered man kills them all with blades made of his own blood, revealing that he too is one of the dragons, a superior one. This terrifies everyone, including the hunter Sykes, who is the second best among them. Ragna also sees the creature in the distance and immediately realizes that those blades are exactly what will cause Leo's death. So when the dragon is about to attack Sykes, Ragna jumps in his direction, determined to do everything to save Leo's life. However, his sword breaks upon hitting the dragon, and the creature then sets everything on fire. Leo sees that Ragna is in danger and rushes to the location worried. Luckily, the boy falls safely into the river. She then asks Skiles to leave the superior dragon with her and go to Ragna. Next, she goes to the creature, swearing to avenge it for hurting Ragna. Meanwhile, the boy continues sinking deeper into the river, reminiscing about his dream. After losing Leo, he sinks into his quest for revenge, aiming to hunt all the dragons to extinction, training to his utmost potential, becoming incredibly strong, even though he feels it's never enough. He also makes new partners, but they all die, leaving him as the lone survivor, leading a life full of losses despite his efforts, reaching a point where he achieves the impossible. Then Ragna manages to get out of the river, encountering the man from his vision again. He finally realizes that this is his future self, and that maybe deep down he only wanted a chance to die, but somehow always managed to survive. The man reveals that he is the future Ragna who caused his visions and expresses disgust for his past self. Despite idolizing Leo as a heroine and professing his love for her, he didn't become the strongest being in the world to keep her safe. He gained the strength he needed only after losing her. But then, even though he was strong enough to face any dragon and protect anyone, he had already lost everything, with nothing left to save, unable to see any reason for all that power. Ragnar asks him to transfer all of his strength to him because it's the right moment to save Leo and the others in the city. His future self agrees, hitting Ragnar with his sword, causing Ragnar to scream in pain, startling Skiles, who was keeping him safe during his visions. At that moment, his past and future selves merge into one, with Ragnar receiving all their memories and powers, understanding everything that happened, and the pain of becoming strong only after losing Leo. However, both Ragnars knew that this union came at a price, and they were both willing to pay it. Meanwhile, Leo is already tired of fighting the superior dragon, and he recognizes her strength. She also asks if he is the famous god of their kind, which annoys the creature. He says he doesn't come close to the grandeur of their god, and that she shouldn't even compare the two. After a long time of battling, he finally introduces himself as Grinwelt, explaining that he is the 10th seat of the Blood of the Wing, the most humble among all the superior dragons. This surprises Leo, as he has proven to be a formidable opponent. Grinwelt decides to have some fun and reveals why the city and the kingdom are marked for destruction. He tells her that their god has always loved the exotic dishes created by humans, especially the famous bakery in the city of Donapiero. However, even though he was a loyal customer, the bakery was robbed and went bankrupt. With the shop's bankruptcy, which was the reason the Wingblood dragons didn't attack the city, their god became extremely sad and angry. As a result, he ordered all of his lineage to destroy the entire kingdom. Grinwelt tells Leo all this to prove that the fate of the human nation was in the hands and whims of the god of the dragons. He insists that the battle between them and the hunters was never real because humans only survived when the dragons didn't take them seriously. He makes it clear that there was not a single human considered a threat to their species. After delivering the speech about how humans were completely insignificant compared to dragons, Grinwelt prepares to end the fight in Leo's life. However, at that moment, he senses a strange presence behind him, becoming frightened and even considering it might be an illusion. What he felt was the new power that Ragnar gained, making him incredibly strong and capable of freezing dragons with a simple touch of his hand, thanks to all the effort of his future self. Grinwelt remembers the memories of the adult Ragnar passing through his head. After losing Leo and spending 10 long years hunting dragons for revenge, desiring their extinction, he slowly became a part of his sword. Even though the fusion was painful, he continued to fight relentlessly. After 5 years, he had completely merged with his silver sword, making his own body a powerful weapon radiating silver. 3 years later, he developed a technique to increase the silver in his body. After another 4 years, he learned to control it at will. After a total of 10 years, he became a being far beyond human capacity, mastering his silver battle arts technique. All these years of training and techniques were now in the present Ragnar. Approaching Grinwelt, he senses a power similar to the one he felt around monarch dragons, those chosen by their god to lead dragon lineages. Despite feeling this supreme power from Ragnar, Grinwelt denies being afraid of a mere human and assumes his true form, enabling him to use his full potential. He starts another speech about how dragons are powerful and humans are weak and inferior. However, in a matter of seconds, Ragnar freezes Grinwelt completely and shatters him, leaving nothing of the supreme and chatty dragon. With everything finished, Ragnar finally comes to his senses, realizing he had saved Leo's life and changed his future of pain and suffering. He runs to her, barely believing what happened, and starts crying, relieved that he still has his partner by his side. As he cries as if the world were ending, she tries to reassure him, saying that everything will be okay and recognizing his hard work to become so strong. He says that someone else worked hard to achieve those results, someone who was no longer there despite Ragnar knowing how much he suffered and missed Leo. Meanwhile, somewhere in the sky, filled with gears for some reason, the future Ragnar meets a girl who tells him that even though he and his past self have accepted the price of their fusion, the past Ragnar won't live for much longer. She notices that in all those years she knew Ragnar, she had never seen him make such a sentimental expression as he was making at that moment. Even after all that time together, this was the first time she saw him without a somber look. However, what mattered now was that all their hopes of creating a world where no dragons existed were entirely in the hands of their past selves. On that day, the dragons attacked 7 cities in the Eastern Kingdom, and out of the 7, 6 were completely destroyed, including the capital. However, on that same day, the Dragon Reaper was born. After that, in Ragnar's city, the dragons mysteriously disappeared and they managed to put out the fire despite the numerous casualties and the destruction of half the city, including the inn where Ragnar and Leo lived. So the two were left without a place to sleep and had to take shelter in the home of the hunter Skiles, with the boy still in shock that he had truly prevented his nightmare from happening. When Skiles enters the room where the two are, Ragnar tells him that the best thing they can do is leave the city and head toward the nearby border because the dragon god demanded the kingdom's destruction, and the creatures treat his demands as law, so they won't give up on attacking the place. However, if they move away from their target, everyone could be safe. Skiles questions why Ragna suddenly became intelligent and extremely strong as he had no talent before. He asks how Ragna gained all that power to defeat Grimwelt so easily, but before he can answer, Ragna falls asleep on his bed. Leo explains that even though he spent many nights training hard while she slept to achieve those results, all that strength was draining him and making him unstable. At that moment, Ragna starts calling for Leo, and she tries to reassure him that she's right by his side, but he continues to call her name. Suddenly, she and Skiles hear a noise and go to see what it is, leaving Ragna sleeping. Outside, they are startled to see that, for some reason, the forest is attacking them. Leo rushes to the site of the attack, with the woman who was with Ragna from the future saying that their story is about to begin now that their paths will cross. A little earlier, we see that somewhere within the forest, a chef serves a roasted lamb dish to a portly man named Marugabud. Clearly, the chef and his staff were very afraid of him, and with good reason. As soon as he tastes the food, Marugabud exclaims that he found the meal delightful, but nothing compared to the taste of the chef. He reveals himself to be a very hungry dragon. He devours the chef, leaving his 2 staff members horrified, but they also don't last long. Next, he moves on to the last person standing and says that the dragon god demanded the destruction of all humans in that kingdom, which means he can devour as many people as he pleases. Then his tentacles start to spread throughout the city like vines, which are the attack Leo and Skiles saw coming toward the forest. The dragon captures the poor girl and prepares to feast on her, just as he did with the others. Meanwhile, dragon hunters rush into the forest, trying to defeat the tentacles they encounter on their way. However, Skiles doesn't understand how a dragon is attacking because they are creatures that should not withstand sunlight. This makes him doubt if they can trust something as basic as this information. Nearby, Leo is attacking the relentless tentacles that keep emerging. Suddenly, she notices that many of them have just destroyed Skiles' house's roof and captured Ragna, who was still sleeping soundly. She rushes to save him, but the tentacles prepare to attack her. However, with Leo in danger, Ragna immediately awakens from his slumber, radiating silver from his body, freezing all the nearby tentacles, which catches the attention of the dragon and the hunters nearby. He then realizes what's happening and runs towards the dragon, completely ignoring Leo, who is calling for him, asking him to wait for her, but ends up falling behind because she struggles to keep up with his pace. Ragna doesn't hear her calling his name because he feels guilty for feeling relieved after saving her and lowering his guard, realizing that he should have known the danger was far from over. He then spots the dragon and delivers a powerful kick to its face, sending it flying and releasing the girl. Ragna believes that the only way to change his future and prevent everyone around him from perishing at the hands of the dragons is to not rest until they are all exterminated by his own hands. However, he wonders if he is truly capable of such a task, considering that even his future self couldn't succeed. It's only at this moment that he recognizes the girl right next to him and realizes she is Crimson, his future partner. Ragna believes that Crimson must have come to find him, but her reaction indicates it was merely a coincidence. Nonetheless, he remains excited because now they can join forces in their mission to exterminate the dragons. However, the girl denies being Crimson and begins to introduce herself. Ragna interrupts her, claiming her name is Eliza Yorkshire, a 14-year-old girl from a farming village, where she worked for a man whose property was attacked by a dragon and she disappeared since then. Ragna insists that at least that was the story she told him in the future, but she corrects him, saying she doesn't understand and clarifies that her name is Elise. Ragna cuts her off again, stating that he knows she is the dragon monarch Crimson, a former Bloodwing progenitor, considered a traitor by her kind for attempting to kill their god. Ragna continues, explaining that it was Crimson who also bridged the future and the present so they could achieve their goal of exterminating the dragons from the world, including himself. Ragna then explains that they share the same objective, and for that reason, they should work together, as this time they might succeed where their future versions failed. However, the girl slaps him in the face, offended because he first referred to her as a man and then as a dragon. This catches Ragna completely by surprise, and at this moment, Leo finally arrives in the forest, exhausted from running so much. However, she's not the only one who arrives, as the dragon has also returned and is very angry that a mere human kicked it in the face. He attacks Ragna, determined to tear him apart, but Ragna tosses a small ball into the dragon's mouth, causing it to explode as he carries Leo to a safe distance from the blast. Ellis observes Ragna from a distance, and Leo looks at how everything froze due to the explosion, recognizing that her partner has become strong, just as she always felt he would, saying she just didn't think it would happen so quickly, and now it will be challenging for her to catch up to his level. Ragna then asks Leo to take the city's residents to safety at the border while he stays behind to handle something. He mentions that he will meet her once he's finished, but Leo insists that they won't part ways and she will stay with him. Ragna explains that it will be dangerous for her, But Leo points out that there's always danger in the dragon hunter's line of work and asks why he's trying to leave her behind. Ragna attempts to explain that they will only be separated for a short time, but this leaves Leo irritated. The boy is surprised as he has never seen her lose her composure like this before, considering that she always appears strong, calm, and resolute with better judgment and confidence than many adults. However, in this situation, he realizes that she is still just a 12-year-old child. Ragnar recalls what his future self said about idolizing a young girl and taking advantage of her, making him understand what he meant as he was weak, forcing her to be stronger than necessary. So he decides that he doesn't want to be weak anymore, as it's the only way he can achieve his goal and keep Leo safe. He reminds the girl of what she said when they first met, about how the weak die and the strong survive, and how that saved him, but now she is weak and won't survive if they continue together. These words hurt Leo, making her so angry that she tries to attack Ragna, but he stops her sword with just a finger and tosses her aside. He then bids her farewell, and Leo loses consciousness. When she wakes up, she is already on her way to the border, being carried by Skiles. The hunter asks what happened between them, and Leo recalls when she told Ragna about her goal to become the strongest in the world. She had held that goal since the first time she wielded her sword, but when she asked if he had a similar dream, he said that as long as he was with her, everything was fine. This brings tears to Leo's eyes because he has now achieved the maximum strength she has always strived for, without understanding why he left her alone. From a distance, Ragna watches as she and the other town's residents depart, and Lise asks if he really wanted to separate from Leo in that way. Ragna cries, saying that he can only be near people if their loss won't hurt him or if they won't die. He goes on to call her Crimson again, which irritates the girl. She says that if she were truly a dragon, she would have died as soon as the sunlight hit her. Ragna insists that the sun is not a problem because his silver art's powers are locked, and even though she can't use her powers properly, her weaknesses have disappeared. She tells Ragna to fulfill his mission of destroying the dragons alone and asks him to stop referring to her as a man. However, he says that she can change her gender and age at will, despite her continued denial of everything he says. This makes Ragna wonder if he will ever gain her trust. He remembers that the future Crimson said the story would begin when their paths crossed, even though it would take some time for her to trust him. So he tries to win the girl over by mentioning the things he knows and what he can do for her, explaining that he is well-versed in arithmetic and accounting, as well as reading and writing since he studied to assist Leo. He also says he can cook delicious dishes and perform other household chores, and he can make her life easier by doing various tasks for her, promising to do all the activities for her, just like he did for Leo. However, Lise finds everything very strange and refuses to form a partnership with him. At this moment, Ragna collapses with a fever, and while he's unconscious, she decides to examine his body, inadvertently revealing her dragon eye. In the future, Ragna met Crimson after defeating a dragon. She appeared to him, admitting she was impressed that a human body had reached such a high level of power. He quickly struck her down, but Crimson reappeared, asking them to join forces as together they could exterminate the dragons. However, as he was a dragon himself, Ragna struck her down again. Crimson reappeared once more, but this time with a different age, insisting that they work together. In the present, Ragna finally awakens, and Lise tells him that she helped him because she couldn't abandon the person who saved her. Ragna thinks he fainted because his body hadn't acclimated to the silver battle arts yet. Lise then asks if it's true that the dragon god ordered them to destroy the kingdom, and Ragna confirms it, saying they need to start hunting all the dragons right away. He explains that they had already accomplished this more than 20 years in the future, but now that they met earlier, they could start the hunt sooner. However, she continues to pretend not to understand, as no human knew her true form, and she doesn't understand how he knows about the future, as something like this had never happened before. Still, she admits that it seems to be quite fun, because while examining Ragna's body while he was asleep, she discovered he is fused with his silver sword, which allows him to generate and emit it. She doesn't understand how it works, but it's evident that Ragna's potential is incredibly high, which excites her and makes her want to test this new method of killing dragons. Suddenly, a dragon flies past them in the direction of the city where the people were. Immediately, Ragna carries the girl and starts running towards the dragon, determined to save the people. He asks if she has any orders, making it clear he will obey whatever she commands, which excites her. She denies being Crimson once again, but orders him to destroy all the dragons. Then, after reaching the location where all the dragons were flying, Ragna prepares to face them, creating several silver swords that defeat the dragons one by one. Crimson examines one of the weapons and realizes that, while not very well made, it has enough potential for a second-rate hunter to eliminate even superior dragons. This makes her imagine how incredible it would be if they could equip an army with such weapons. She then releases her servant, a slime inside her stomach, and finally takes on the appearance of Crimson, eliminating the remaining living dragons. Ragna is pleased to see that he was right about her being Crimson, and she says she'll accept joining forces with him on the condition that he drinks a poison that will only take effect if he attempts to rebel against her, as his silver power poses a threat and she needs some guarantee. She tells him to drink it if he truly wants to be used by her, thinking she will have to deliver a convincing speech to persuade the boy. But Ragna drinks the poison without hesitation, which surprises her. She asks why he is so determined to exterminate the dragons. Ragna explains that it's the only way he can protect everything that his future self lost. Crimson comments that it doesn't sound like a very heroic goal because it seems to be for his own benefit. However, that doesn't matter much to her because she will use and guide him on the path to the extinction of their kind, eliminating all 6 dragon lineages and then their god. But she makes it clear that when their mission is complete, Ragna must eliminate her to wipe out all the dragons from the face of the earth completely. He agrees to Crimson's terms, realizing that he has heard the same speech from her in his future. With him accepting all of her terms, she says they can start the story of how they will exterminate all the dragons in the world. After reaching an agreement with Crimson, Ragna gets to know Slime better, who appears in his human form to question the way he was speaking with his master. Ragna acts as if he already knew him, which irritates Slime. Slime asks Ragna to address him as Lord Slime because he is Crimson's #1 servant. However, she interrupts and asks Ragna to tell her about the future. He explains that they lost the battle against the dragons, but Crimson already knew that and asked Ragna for more details, such as how many dragon monarchs he killed. Crimson bombards the boy with questions he couldn't answer, and Ragna explains that he only has a general outline of the future's memory, but doesn't remember details. Ragna says he only recognized Crimson after seeing her, meaning he needed a trigger to access his memories, which Crimson finds quite convenient. Ragna asks if she was suspicious of him, and Crimson explains that she's suspicious of everyone except herself. She then asks if Ragna can use his strength to its full extent or if he can only remember the basics. Ragna explains that his strength doesn't depend on his brain but on his body, allowing him to access his full strength. Meanwhile, a superior dragon is enjoying the screams of the girls caught in its tornado, making him feel even more in tune with the wind. After some time, some dragon hunters engage in battle with the creatures, but they are no longer confident and don't feel like true hunters. At that moment, Ragna appears and swiftly eliminates all the dragons with his silver aura. Crimson expresses her interest in seeing how the boy's power works, and immediately Ragna says he will eliminate as many dragons as she wants, but Crimson doesn't want Ragna to do anything. She wants the dragon hunters to handle it. She introduces herself to the people, assuring them that everything will be fine because Ragna, the Reaper, has eliminated all the nearby creatures. She claims the boy is a dragon hunter who has already defeated several superior dragons, and she's a mage and his companion. Most of the magic in that world belongs to the superior dragons, but there are a few human magic users, though they are so few that no one knows exactly what magic is despite being aware of its existence. Crimson decides to take advantage of the people's limited knowledge of magic by using her power and pretending it's magic. They believe that Slime, who is devouring the dragon's bodies, is also a type of magic, and Crimson invents that he is a pet she created. Everyone is impressed with her power, and she encourages them to repeat multiple times how amazing magic is. After repeating the same phrase several times, one of the dragon hunters introduces himself. His name is Michael, and he tells Crimson and Ragna that there is a dragon that only the two of them can defeat. He explains that everyone there fled from a tornado that clearly had a sinister creature inside it. Crimson realizes that the man is talking about the third seat, the third dragon from the top, which personifies the wind named Disastraw. Ragna starts to leave, determined to hunt the dragon, but Crimson stops him by throwing him to the ground. The boy had exerted himself so much that he had completely worn out his muscle fibers in a way that he couldn't even stand up. Ragna hadn't realized how drained he was until she threw him to the ground. Crimson tells Ragna that he needs to remain immobile for about 3 days and asks him to leave everything to her. She then explains to the dragon hunters that the Reaper is injured and unable to move. Michael is worried and asks if she couldn't solve the situation with magic, as they were their only hope. But Crimson explains that if he exerts himself now, he could end his dragon hunter career. Another man asks if she couldn't go in his place, and Michael offers her any amount she wants, explaining that they were all willing to sell their equipment. Crimson realizes that they were willing to give up being dragon hunters and decides to have some fun. She declines Michael's offer and asks why they were so obsessed with hunting Disastraw. After all, they were no longer in danger of their lives and could simply move on. She questions why they offered to pay any amount for the two to defeat a dragon that was no longer a threat to them. However, Crimson knew very well why they were doing this, as Disastraw had a wide attack range. Anyone in its path had to run quickly without a moment to spare. If they all survived a dragon like that, it could only mean they heard people pleading for help behind them but ignored it to escape. After a while, they heard silence because those who begged for help had already been caught by the wind and felt the excruciating pain from its cuts. Because of this, they were now feeling guilty, as if they had blood on their hands. Michael confesses that they indeed went through all that and can't bear the voices of people still sounding in their heads. Everyone had a sense of guilt, but Michael says they knew they couldn't even scratch a superior dragon. Crimson takes this opportunity to remind them of the pride they felt as dragon hunters who protected people. Michael remembers the feeling, but at the moment, they all felt weak, seeing themselves as prey of dragons, not heroic hunters. But if the problem was power, Crimson shows them the solution in her hands, presenting Ragna's Reaper sword. She says she can't guarantee their lives, but with that weapon, they can gain the power they need to face even a superior dragon. After giving hope to everyone, she asks them to return to being dragon hunters and prepare for the hunt. And so Crimson takes them to the city of Tortir, a place full of debris. As she opens a door with her key, they see a room full of weapons, and Crimson explains that she created it with magic, leaving everyone in awe. They had never seen weapons like those, and Crimson explains that what really matters are the bullets. While Ragnar recovers his body, the men train in marksmanship to prepare for the hunt. At that moment, Crimson notices that Ragnar was acting a bit strangely. She asks if he's worried that she's using people as pawns. However, the boy says he doesn't care about that since he knows Crimson will help them win, despite Crimson repeating that she's ensuring victory, not their lives. Ragnar then confesses that he was bothered by just lying around doing nothing, and that he didn't like it when she called him the Reaper because people could lose their lives by being associated with him. Crimson reminds him that Ragnar only wants to keep those who are unafraid to lose their lives or can't afford to lose close, and that's why he chose to be with a dragon like her instead of Leo. Ragnar says that Leo isn't her concern, but Crimson retorts that she is, as Leo was the reason he was in that fight, and that's why she didn't know what would happen if Ragnar lost her. Crimson wanted the boy to destroy all the dragons and wouldn't tolerate him giving up on the reason he became a dragon hunter, making Leo important to them once they became allies. Ragnar then opens up to Crimson. He explains that he feels Leo is safer near him because leaving the girl alone doesn't guarantee her safety. But even though he knows that, he can't bear the idea of losing Leo right in front of his eyes because just imagining it feels like his heart would shatter. Crimson says she can understand him a little, feeling somewhat pleased. She suggests he should put Leo into one of his empty storage containers so he could render her in a vegetative state, ensuring she doesn't resist and remains asleep in a safe place while he finishes exterminating the dragons in the world. For the dragon, it was the perfect way to protect Leo, but obviously Ragnar doesn't like the idea at all and even tries to punch Crimson with the limited movement he had. Crimson finds the situation amusing and Ragnar calls her miserable, but the dragon doesn't care because for Crimson, that's one of her main characteristics. She then mentions how annoying Ragnar's attitude was when they first met, acting as if he knew everything about her when he knew nothing. Despite that, Crimson assures Ragnar that she will kill Diz's Troll, and that while she does that, he can continue to recover and build his silver aura. Crimson then recalls that he once said he felt cursed. So she takes a weapon and shoots herself in the head. Ragnar is horrified, but immediately, Crimson reappears in a new body, proving that she indeed lives under a real curse, and she asks him never to say something like that again. Then she goes to Slime. He says that he extended one of his eyes throughout the entire city as she asked. As a gift, Crimson offers her body for Slime to feed on, making her servant very happy. He shows her everything he saw in the city, explaining that it was all destroyed and the tornado was in the middle of it, with Diz's Troll and many people inside it, floating in the wind. He says there are 16 victims in total, all of them women, all of whom are already seriously injured and lifeless. This makes Crimson think about how lonely Troll is. But while he was busy, he wouldn't bother anyone, so she decides to take advantage of the situation. While thinking, Slime feeds on her body, becoming very excited. Crimson then says it's time to attack because there are no survivors in the city, making it much better for them. However, she decides not to reveal the entire situation to Ragnar and the other dragon hunters. And so at night, Crimson says it's time to attack and gives a motivational speech, telling everyone that that day the true dragon hunters will act and eliminate an evil dragon disturbing the city. Her words make all the dragon hunters celebrate. Then they set out for the hunt, trusting Crimson completely. Diz's Troll notices them approaching and thinks that help came too late because there was no one left there who could be saved. However, no matter how much he wanted to have more fun, Diz's Troll knew that the sun would rise soon and thought it best to leave while there was still time. But Crimson grabs a megaphone to say that they are the dragon hunters who will take advantage of that morning to eliminate an evil dragon disturbing the city. She continues, saying that the dragon is just a lonely being pretending to communicate with the wind when it's just a monologue. She even says that he is a creature bored of standing in the middle of nowhere by orders of a crazy master. Thinking that a mere human was saying these words, Disistroa becomes irritated that such a weak creature would speak this way of the dragon lineage. He believes that whoever said those words clearly didn't know him, as he is a winged blood, a third from the top, the dragon of the wind, feared by all for causing excruciating pain with his tornado. The man begins a giant monologue about his superiority, but it only proves that Crimson was right, and he was indeed a very lonely being, now wishing to take out his frustration on the dragon hunters. While everyone prepared to proceed with the plan, Michael couldn't help but ponder how they had spent 2 entire days preparing for that attack, putting complete trust in Crimson and pushing their fears aside. However, as he witnessed the enemy's power, Michael began to doubt whether they could truly face a superior dragon like that. Despite his fear, he stood firm and encouraged his companions to press on. The Disistroa tornado was twice as fast as the vehicle they were using. Knowing this, Crimson planned to drive towards the sun, combining the attack of sunlight with a silver attack, since only one of them wouldn't be enough to defeat a dragon like that, as his body regenerated faster than it received damage. The hunters followed the plan and fired at the dragon. Contrary to what all the hunters believed, the silver didn't freeze the dragon's blood, but rather the magical power flowing around it. It was the silver that started to freeze the Disistroa tornado. However, unbeknownst to him, the bullets were regular, and it was actually the silver aura of Ragna, hidden and recovered, that was freezing his tornado. Disistroa thought that this trick wouldn't be enough to destroy his tornado. However, at that moment, Michael fired, this time using a genuine silver bullet. Although the tornado managed to resist the attack, it was significantly weakened. This infuriated Disistroa, who still believed that the mere hunters were deluded to think they could face a superior dragon like him. The hunters continued to shoot, and Crimson found it amusing. Then, thanks to Ragna's silver aura, the dragon's tornado dissipated, causing it to fall. Slime captured Disistroa and threw him onto the silver lance of the hunters, and the dragon began to freeze. Disistroa was shocked to realize that the humans had indeed defeated him. The dragon struggled, trying to conjure his tornado again, but he was too weak to use his power. As the sun began to rise, the dragon started to burn, successfully concluding all parts of their plan. Suddenly, Disistroa managed to break free from the hunters, still impaled on the silver lance, but Crimson ran him over. Too weak to fight, Disistroa understood that he was defeated and wondered how a dragon like him could be defeated by mere hunters. After all, he was a super powerful, superior dragon capable of creating 8 tornadoes at once. Crimson, who knew his abilities, realized that if he had used them, the group would never have been able to defeat Disistroa. But his pride had driven him to want to defeat the humans without using his full power, leading to his downfall. Crimson noted that after Silver and Sunlight, pride was the 3rd weakest point of every dragon. However, even though she possessed all the necessary knowledge to defeat Disistroa, the plan was actually Ragna's. He knew that Crimson had the knowledge to defeat any dragon she wanted and didn't need to know about the future. Still, she wanted to test her knowledge as an experiment. He realized that Crimson was as amazing as she was formidable. Even though they were partners at that moment, once they finished hunting all the dragons, Ragna would have to hunt Crimson. After they finished eliminating the Wind Dragon, everyone bid their farewells, and Crimson erased the hunters' memories, causing them to forget about her. Afterward, Crimson disappeared, and the hunters thanked Ragna, saying they wouldn't have been able to defeat the dragon without his help. However, Ragna replied that he hadn't done much, and Michael said they could claim that the dragon hunters had achieved the victory. After the hunters left for the border, Crimson showed Ragna a radio. In the broadcast, the royal army of Reese sent a message to all the kingdom's subjects. All the borders were under attack by dragons, and they were instructed to follow the local authorities' guidance to evacuate to the capital, where they would receive shelter. However, it was explicitly stated that no one should approach the borders. Upon hearing the message, the two realized that it was clearly a trap set by the dragons, who were blocking all the exits to lead people to the capital, gathering everyone in one place, so they prepared for a new hunt. 5 days earlier in the capital, King Femid Reese received news that the dragons had destroyed the city of Donapieru and decimated his army. The informant recounted that in the middle of the night, many lightning strikes had struck the city, and several dragons had attacked simultaneously. The king instructed the informant to gather the troops and send reinforcements from the cities of Ranabarilla and Tortir immediately. Additionally, he asked them to hire as many dragon hunters as possible, emphasizing that they should avoid superior dragons at all costs. The king then pondered the lightning strikes that had hit the city, and his advisor mentioned the similarity to an event that occurred 20 years ago when Garnus's army invaded the Dornapiera region and was decimated by an unknown dragon that shot lightning. The king had hoped that the dragons living among them could coexist peacefully and wondered why the dragons were attacking at that particular moment. But he remained calm because the city was protected by a barrier and not even the strongest superior dragon could breach it. Ironically, at that very moment, a dragon appeared. She was a winged girl who looked like an angel. She apologized for her unexpected visit and introduced herself as Artemisia, a first-level dragon from the winged lineage crowned by the dragon god. King Femid recognized her as the dragon with angelic wings known as the King of Wings. Artemisia was pleased with the title given to her by humans. He asked how she had managed to breach the barrier. The capital was protected by a solar wall that absorbed sunlight's energy and converted it into a protective aura, making the city glow even at night, known as the sunset technique. Artemisia reassured the king that the barrier was working perfectly, and that it even made her struggle with the heat. Realizing that his barrier didn't affect Artemisia, the king thought of her as a mysterious being no one knew much about. Femid didn't understand her true role in the war between humans and dragons. Seeing the king's concern, Artemisia assured him that his subjects couldn't move, but nothing bad would happen to them. She explained that she had frozen the world with her temporal manipulation magic to prevent the city from panicking about her visit. She apologized for freezing his city and explained that she did it because she wanted to talk to the king and offer her apologies. This caught King Femid off guard. Artemisia explained that it was never her intention to attack Dornapieru, but one of the dragons had done so without waiting for her orders. She was left with no choice but to punish him for his actions and go there to apologize. She said she was sorry for not being able to stop the panic caused by the destruction of Dornapieru. Her actions, combined with her angelic appearance and gentle voice, made King Femid question if she was really a dragon. He'd wondered why he could still move if she had frozen the world, and since she claimed the barrier was working, he wondered whether he should attack her or not. However, Femid thought better of it and concluded that attacking her was not the right course of action. Not only was the winged dragon not showing herself as a threat, but it would likely lead to war against her entire lineage, resulting in the annihilation of his kingdom. The king decided to accept the dragon's gesture and bowed to her. Femid then said he accepted her apologies. Artemisia was grateful and said it only made her task more painful. She wanted to prevent her subjects from suffering and offer a quick and painless end to all of them. This left King Femid in shock. He remembered that Artemisia had said she didn't want to attack the city. However, she clarified that she didn't want to attack the city, but Femid's kingdom had to be destroyed because that was the will of her all-powerful god. Artemisia said she had planned to do it quickly and discreetly, but the attack on Dornapieru prevented her from doing so because the population panicked and some subjects even wanted to escape the kingdom. Therefore, Artemisia ordered her subordinates to go to the borders to block the passage and prevent people from fleeing. King Femid asked Artemisia to stop her subordinates, but she refused to do so. He then asked if she wished to start a war. Artemisia replied that there wouldn't be any war, only the massacre of him and his kingdom, apologizing once more for having to do it. Femid attempted to negotiate, but Artemisia said it was not possible. So, with no other choice, Femid decided to act and use the power of the barrier to launch an attack against Artemisia. His ring glowed and it caused all the city's lights to go out, concentrating all the solar energy from his barrier into a single point to strike Artemisia. However, just before releasing the attack, Femid was suddenly attacked by one of his subjects, Borgias, who revealed himself as Artemisia's subordinate. Another subordinate, Nebuline, stepped in front of Artemisia to protect her from anything that could harm the King of Wings. Artemisia thanked Nebuline for protecting her but questioned Borgias, who had fatally attacked King Femid with a devastating blow, as Artemisia had not ordered him to kill the king. She expressed her disapproval of such cruelty and decided to use her power to turn back time to before Borgias launched his attack against Femid. Everything returned to how it was before, and she apologized to Femid once more because it had not been her intention to kill him in that manner. Femid was in complete shock, realizing that he was alive again after being certain that he had been killed by the attack just moments earlier. Artemisia then explained that she had manipulated the flow of time with her magic to turn back time before the attack. Femid was awestruck by her immense power, considering Artemisia not just a dragon but perhaps a deity. However, she clarified that she was merely a servant of the true god and that it was the will of this powerful deity to destroy Femid's kingdom. The king then realized that humans could not face even the power of one of this deity's servants, let alone the power of the dragon god. Artemisia said that soon everything would be destroyed and none of them would be able to escape, as it was their destiny according to her god's will. She explained that she had a way to spare them from suffering, but she needed King Femid's assistance. Her plan was to eliminate as many people as possible quickly and painlessly. She told Femid that, as a king, he must help guide his subjects. With no other choice, he agreed to help her achieve her goal. The royal army of Lys conveys a crucial message to all citizens. They report a large-scale dragon attack occurring in a city near the border. As a result, all citizens from every city should follow the royal army's instructions and evacuate directly to the capital. In the king's castle, a soldier informs His Majesty Fehmed Reis that the number of refugees keeps increasing, and at this rate, it would be challenging to continue allowing entry to everyone. The king, with an empty gaze, says that this is not a problem and that everyone should be let in. He reassures that there's no need to worry about the future and that everything will be fine. On the other side of the city, a black-headed figure on a lance comments that no matter how proud or capable a person may be, after they die, they seem to lose their soul. He is referring to the king as apparently his spirit has disappeared. Then Artemisia arrives and says that she thought he would be a pile of ashes by now. The figure responds, expressing great happiness at her presence. She informs him about the entire situation. The plan was already in motion, and in 10 days, all the people gathered in the capital will have a peaceful death. However, there is a problem. The 9th place, Dornia, was defeated. The culprit was Starly Elise, the second princess of that kingdom. The figure mentions her as the Silver Princess and the Argentum troop. The queen reveals that she has sent the 5th place and the 6th place after her. The figure questions if she would prefer him to go after her, but she responds that she has another mission for him. The 3rd place, Disistroal, the 8th place, Marugabud, and the 10th place, Grimwelt, disappeared near the southern border. The figure suspects it might have been the Solarian or another dragon lineage, but the elder says it's a completely unknown threat. Then Artemisia hands over her heart to the figure, allowing him to regenerate his entire body. Artemisia mentions that his punishment is temporarily suspended and orders him to subdue the insurgents. It is then revealed that he is the 2nd place, Woltekamui. He accepts but asks if he'll get a kiss as a reward. The queen gives him a smack in the face and tells him that he never learns his lesson. The demon has fun irritating his progenitor. Artemisia urges him to go, but he asks for a moment to enjoy it as he is a very fast being. Then in the form of lightning, he flies away. Suddenly, we see Ragna from the past in a desolate land surrounded by all the mature dragons. He came there while chasing the winged blood but was captured and pinned down with needles piercing his arm. Once again, he survives without doing anything and starts screaming with anger, but Borgias kicks him in the stomach and orders him to be silent. Borgias asks everyone how they should deal with that human while everyone else had died. He asks for their opinions. Chantiuras, the 12th place, is bold and believes there's no other option but to kill him as he sees no reason to let him live. Baron Shura, the 11th place, suggests making him food for those who want to eat. Grimwelt, the 10th place, suggests stabbing him and exposing his carcass. Dornian, the 9th place, prefers to use him in her experiments since she's developing a new floral arrangement with humans. Maruvabu, the 8th place, claims to have a cruel and unusual murder method. Ultozora, the 6th place, expresses no interest in that terrible and pathetic man, so they can do as they please. Terratectra, the 5th place, is also indifferent. Nebulum, the 4th place, believes they should kill him in the least painful way possible. Disistroal, the 3rd place, wants them to finish it quickly because the humans' moans are very annoying. Ragna can't move even an inch. He laments that the only thing he can do is groan. He wonders why he's still alive and didn't die that day with Leo. Ragna is frustrated with his weakness, but at least this time his life won't be spared, so it's all right. After all, he's tired of everything and just wants to finally find peace. Woltekamu realizes that Ragna wants to die and lifts him up by the neck, saying they now have a decision. They won't kill Ragna so he can burn in the fires of his own hatred and despair at his weakness. Dissis says he doesn't care about Woltekamu's selfish opinion and tells him to get it over with. Woltekamu questions when they became so soft-hearted. He releases Ragna and asks if anyone opposes his opinion, then Artemisia appears and strikes him with her lance, saying she disagrees with his opinion. The dragon's head pops out of his body with a blow and he falls to the ground. Artemisia explains that she despises those who disturb the group's harmony and tells Woltekamu to shut up. Artemisia has heard everyone's opinions but asks them to accept her desire. She says she would like to welcome him as part of the lineage. Everyone is surprised and Woltekamu, as he puts his head back, questions why she wants that. However, he is hit again by Artemisia and falls to the ground. The queen approaches and introduces herself as Ultimacia, the progenitor of the winged blood. She notices Ragna's sword and recognizes it as one used by dragon hunters from a kingdom that once existed. Despite being a lovely country, she destroyed all of them, except Ragna, who survived that day and also survived today. She is very pleased and believes it must be God's will, so he has permission to live. Ragna has no idea what she's talking about. Then Ulto explains that being part of the lineage means an invitation to be transformed into a dragon. The others explain that despite people thinking that superior dragons like them are menial dragons who can assume human form, that thought is entirely wrong. In reality, inferior and medial dragons are mere beasts born from their blood. They, mature dragons, used to be human but received blood from their progenitor and transformed. Therefore, Ragna should be happy because he will receive the gift of evolving into a life form far above humans. However, Ragna absolutely does not want to become a dragon like them, as they killed Leo and many other people he cared about and could come to care about. Ragna hates the dragons so much and refuses to become one, but he doesn't have the strength to say a word. Holto says that if he becomes part of the lineage, all this hatred will disappear, just as Ultos did. Artemisia says that despite the nonsense Wolt Camus spoke earlier, she wants to save him from that hell. She creates a blood blade with her powers and says she will stab it into his heart. When she does that, the transformation will begin. Ragna uses his last strength to beg her not to do it, but she asks him not to be afraid, as he won't cease to be himself. However, the way he sees the world will change. Artemisia plunges the blood blade into Ragna's back, piercing his body and going straight to his heart. His transformation begins and he screams in agony. So Ragna wakes up startled in a train carriage next to Crimson and Slime. He mentions it felt like he was having a fun dream, so he didn't wake him. He also tells Slime to keep quiet. Crimson asks if he remembered anything useful. Despite Crimson being a jerk, he's still better than Ultimacia, as her gentle demeanor while killing countless people is terrible for Ragna. He promises to hunt her down no matter what it takes because he's stronger now. Crimson still doesn't know how much of his own power Ragna can use, and he's also unaware of the price that must be paid to use it to its full extent. So he prefers to wait a few years and fully prepare to kill Ultimacia. However, the Queen must already be aware of the strange activity near the border, and by now, Woltakumlu must be free because he's the most powerful fighter of all. Without his protection, this is the perfect time to set an ambush against Ultimacia. So if Ragna defeats the Queen, it's a bonus. But if he loses, Crimson will save him because he's an irreplaceable tool. The train approaches the capital, and they plan the next steps of their operation and how they'll secure an audience with the winged progenitor. In the capital, through a vision, Artemisia asks God, who appears as a child, if he wishes for everything in Lys to be destroyed. The child asks what Lys is. Artemisia deduces that this country no longer exists in God's mind. Therefore, everything in this world that isn't in God's mind must be obliterated. After all, they are God's members, and the lineage exists for that reason. She weeps for all the members of the lineage who have died because none of them served as God's members. They weren't fit to be part of the lineage. She pleads to at least let the destruction of that country be an offering. Amid the citizens, Smile is impressed by the size of the capital. Crimson explains that they are in the new district, the commercial center of the capital. It's the most bustling region of the city, and they are just crossing the second castle wall to enter the old district. Moreover, Crimson asks that from now on, they address him only as Veronica. When they look to the side, Ragna is vomiting. He explains that he gets sick in crowds. Crimson thinks it's a joke and an improper weakness, given that he survived in Ronabera, which is also a large city. Ragna tries to remember and recalls that the reason was Leo, who had always been by his side. Crimson questions if they should cancel a hunt due to Ragna's condition. However, he promises that he will be fine because no matter what happens or how sick he is, the moment Ultimacia enters his line of sight, he will hunt her. So Crimson supports Ragna on his shoulders to continue. He asks him to pretend that he's Leo by his side, but Ragna says he will never be like Leo. After some time, the trio arrives in the old district. Crimson prepares for the operation, but Ragna is very unwell. So he asks Slime to stay and take care of Ragna until his return in 2 hours. Crimson orders Slime not to get into trouble, move unnoticed, and not mention the enemy's name out loud. Crimson leaves the two and moves through the crowd. He notices that despite the many people, the flow of Awakens should have already exceeded the city's limits. He wonders how it can still accommodate more people. There's only one explanation. They are gradually reducing the number of people by secretly eliminating citizens. Meanwhile, Nebulum finishes the selection of people for the day, just waiting for nightfall. Borges asks where the progenitor is, and Nebulum replies that she went to see the situation of the Awakens. Borges is furious because it's their duty to oppose the Queen's whims. Nebulum explains that the progenitor is in the old district. At another part of the capital, Lieutenant General Rowan enjoys dinner with 2 beautiful women. He flirts with the ladies and suggests they go up to his room. However, Crimson arrives and asks if he can join the conversation, already knowing Rowan. Minutes later, the lieutenant is on his knees asking Crimson, calling him by the name Veronica, to notify him when he's coming so he and his servant can prepare a proper reception. However, Veronica smacks Rowan and reminds him that he ordered him to gather information while posing as a high-ranking army officer, but seems more focused on having fun. So Veronica asks another servant named Chimera to appear as well. She comes from outside the window, transforming from a feline to a human, and pledges her loyalty to her master. Then Veronica explains that everyone needs to cooperate so that Ragna can kill the winged monarch. In the midst of the crowd, Ragna and Slime watch a military performance. The soldiers lower a large curtain, revealing petrified dragon heads that start to catch fire. The captain promises that the Royal Lace Army will kill every last dragon and keep its population safe. Ragna steps away and bumps into a hooded girl. He looks and is shocked to realize it's Ultimacia. Then he remembers what Crimson said earlier. If he ever encountered her, he should, under no circumstances, fight her alone. If that happens, the hunt would be over. Sensing Ragna's odd behavior, Ultimacia approaches and asks if he's feeling unwell because he looks extremely pale. Crimson informs his servants Golem and Chimera that Ragna will be fighting Ultimacia. Therefore, they all need to cooperate so they can kill the winged monarch. Golem questions this as he thought their only job was to keep an eye on the blood of the wings while they destroy the country. However, Crimson reveals that he has discovered something intriguing called Ragna, and because of that, the situation has changed. At that moment, they had a great opportunity to hunt down the winged monarch. Golem gives advice saying they shouldn't challenge Ultimacia now. However, Crimson disregards his advice and the servant becomes indignant. Using his reconnaissance drone, he saw the exact moment when the winged monarch took control of the capital while using her time control magic. Golem asks his master how he will overcome something like that. He asks him not to worry as only Ragna will fight, not them. The boy's combat skills are greater than those of the two servants. Thus, Golem is relieved to have such a powerful ally, but he remains concerned. He can't help but wonder what it really means to be strong when facing the power to control time. Meanwhile, Ultimacia encounters Ragna and asks if he's feeling well because of his appearance. Ragna is torn by his thoughts as a part of him wants to follow Crimson's instructions and avoid the fight, but another, manifested by his past self, wants relentlessly to attack Ultimacia at that moment. She is alone, and this is a great opportunity, even though she shows no apparent hostility. He is hesitating, but his thoughts are consuming him from the inside. Back with Crimson, Golem and Chimera bicker like children. The servant asks for permission to do the job alone, claiming that her partner is overwhelmed by cowardice. He calls her a brainless bird-brained beast, and she finds it amusing to hear that from a noisy pile of scrap metal. Golem starts teasing her by asking her to solve basic math problems, and while he can answer quickly, she struggles. He doesn't tire of taunting his colleague until Crimson approaches and smacks him with his fan. Like a mother separating her children in a fight, Crimson tells them that they are works of art he created with his knowledge and skills, even though he used different approaches for each. Therefore, insulting each other is the same as spitting on their master. Crimson forgets what they were talking about, and Golem shows his fly-shaped drone. The servant uses the drone to project images of the winged monarch using her time control magic. The three of them are impressed by the power of time control. Then Crimson asks Golem to self-destruct, leaving him shocked and confused. The master asks if he's insinuating that Crimson is acting like an obsessed fool with his new toy. Golem realizes the problem he has created for himself and becomes afraid, but Crimson says it would be inconvenient for him to do it now, and it's better if he explodes during the battle. He begs for mercy, and the master loses patience and kicks him to the ground. Crimson then reveals that the time control magic is not invincible, and those images are proof of that. Elsewhere in the country, Woltakamui arrives in his lightning form and encounters the group of warriors who fought against Troa. He is upset that the dragon was hunted down by those idiots. The warriors are frightened because they realize that this dragon is superior. Woltakamui says it's clear from their faces that they already know it's their time to die. He demands that they tell him everything they know about the guy who gave them those silver swords. They are free to refuse to provide the information if they have the courage. In the city, Ultimacia continues to stand in front of Ragna, who is paralyzed. Slime advises Ragna to keep his distance, as this guy might end up vomiting on her. He mentions Ragna's nausea in crowds and calls him a real wimp. The monarch apologizes and says she didn't realize. Slime accepts her apology without any issues and says that we all make mistakes. Ragna has his hand on the hilt of his sword, hesitating, but ultimately decides to give up. He won't fight, and he sees it as a better option to find Crimson and hunt down the monarch again later. In a very friendly manner, Ultimacia apologizes for the inconvenience and asks him to take care of himself. Despite this being a good moment, Ragna believes that this is the right decision. He almost acted rashly when he was alone, but thanks to Slime, he didn't take any further actions. Slime approaches Ultimacia and senses a different scent from cumins, which seems delicious to him. He jumps off Ragna's shoulder and asks for permission to lick Ultimacia's face. However, the boy accompanying her intervenes and stands in front of Slime, reminding her to hurry up and find her parents. Slime becomes curious and asks what the boy was talking about. Ultimacia explains that she was helping him find his parents. Ragnar is inwardly furious to hear this as he remembers all the harm that the monarch has caused throughout his life. He can't believe that someone like her is being kind to that child. Ragnar asks for the reason but quickly regrets it, as it might raise suspicion. Uncomprehending, Ultimacia asks if there needs to be a reason to be kind to someone. Ragnar reflects for a while, but then he pulls Slime and asks them to leave. However, Ultimacia calls him and asks him to wait, wondering if they have met somewhere before. Before she finishes the question, Ragnar denies it shortly and continues on his way. Then Nebulum arrives looking for Ultimacia. He is relieved to find the monarch after searching for a long time. The elder is furious, and she apologizes for the trouble she caused. But before they continue their conversation, Nebulum asks who the guy is, pointing at Ragnar and suspecting he might be a dragon hunter. Ragnar places his hand on his sword in alert for what might happen, but the monarch explains that she initiated the conversation and that he was just feeling sick in the crowd. Nebulum then recalls that this kind of thing is normal and happens to many people, including him. Remembering it, he gets sick and vomits in the middle of the square. Ultimacia is concerned and suggests they find a less crowded place, but as she looks back, she realizes that Ragma and Slime have disappeared. While they review the footage, Golem and Chimera wonder why the winged monarch is not visible. Chimera realizes that after appearing suddenly, the rune changes completely. She concludes that Ultimacia stopped time up to that moment. The question is, why did she choose that moment to resume the flow of time? At first, Golem thinks she may have run out of magic, or perhaps there is a limit to how long she can freeze time. But then Crimson explains that at that moment, she only reversed time for the injuries that led to the death of King Lise. Despite her immense power, Ultimacia cannot pause and reverse time simultaneously. To reverse time, she must unpause it, and while she is in the process of reversing it, she cannot pause it. Therefore, this is the weakness of time control magic. Crimson envisions a scenario in which they plan an ambush and kill the monarch. If they do that, she will automatically use her magic to reverse her body to a living state. However, while she is doing that, she cannot freeze time. So before she finishes restoring her body, they kill her again. The magic is triggered again, and time is reversed. They kill her again, and so on. If this continues, her magic will run out and she won't be able to turn back time. Naturally, to defend herself, Crimson hopes she will counterattack using her energy reserves. That's why Ragnar must be able to defend himself and kill her. Crimson recalls the conversation they had by the campfire, and if it's true that they killed the winged monarch in the future, this must have been the method used. The only direct lethal aspect of time control magic is the inability to use different powers simultaneously. This is the only way to confront the monarch at the moment, so Ragnar is capable of defeating her in a one-on-one confrontation. Golem and Chimera's role is to take care of Nebulum and Borgias, preventing the dragons from helping the winged monarch. They must be cautious, as this is a great responsibility. In alley, Slime asks what's gotten into Ragnar. He ignores the servant and questions if he made the right choice. Despite the fact that his future self wouldn't have hesitated, Ragnar is different. He hasn't lost anyone yet. Then a representation of Crimson emerges from the shadows and reminds him to stay calm and obey his orders. Although he convinces himself that he made the right choice, Ragnar still has a horrible feeling inside him. He asks Slime to transmit a message to Crimson using a communication device. The message is that he found the target. Crimson then goes out alone, leaving Slime astounded. Meanwhile, Crimson realizes that his servants still don't trust Ragnar. This is understandable since a new human without loyalty is playing an essential role. However, the mage is not worried because he has been sending subliminal messages to Ragnar since the day they met. On a day, he gives the order the hunter will ruthlessly kill whomever he wants. Crimson then receives a desperate message from Slime. The master asks what it's about, and upon realizing that Slime failed to follow all of Crimson's orders, Slime decides to speak out, saying that the stupid human betrayed them. In the square, Ultimacia and Nebulum return the lost child to his parents. She thanks him for the help, and he affirms that the monarch had no selfish actions. Ultimacia asks if that family was included in the list for that night, and Nebulum confirms, saying that the three of them will disappear. The monarch is pleased because this way she can make people inside the barrier disappear without feeling pain. Although escaping death is not possible, pain and fear can be avoided. Ragnar listens to all of this and becomes furious. He approaches Nebulum from behind and says he wants to start over. He reveals that the reason he was sick before was actually the fear of not being able to use his power fully to accomplish his mission. Ultimacia apologizes because she had no idea what he was talking about. Then she calls for Nebulum, but realizes that he has been frozen. The petrified dragon's body falls to the ground, shattering into pieces. Ragnar wields his sword, ready for the fight, and apologizes to Crimson. If he doesn't fight at that moment, his oath to kill all the dragons would have been in vain. Finally, Ultimacia realizes that this man is her enemy and assumes her angelic form. She begins to invoke her magic, but before she even notices, Ragna hits her with several swords and kills the monarch. Time control magic is activated, and she starts to regenerate her body, but before it is complete, Ragna strikes her and destroys her body. The monarch is thrown away. The citizens are in panic and flee. The magic is activated and the rewind begins once more, but it takes 2.88 seconds to complete. In that time, Ragna kills her once more with his silver sword. Ultimacia is killed so quickly that she doesn't even have time to express her feelings. She decides to counterattack, but Ragna is more powerful and hits her numerous times. He tells her she can rewind time as many times as she wants. The monarch tries to use her powers, but Ragna is much faster, and before she can release her magic, he impales her with his silver swords all over her body. Ultimacia summons a blood blade and threatens to plunge it into Ragna's heart, asserting that when she does so, the transformation will begin in him. She embraces Ragna, consoling the hunter, assuring him that he won't cease to be himself. Still holding Ragnar in her arms, she thrusts the blade through his back, claiming that his worldview will change forever. An intense reaction begins in Ragna's body. As he screams in pain, his veins bulge and the inside of his body pulses in blue and red. He declares that his body is so hot it burns from the inside and everything irreplaceable to him is gone. Ultimacia tells Ragna to forget his hatred so that they can live for the sake of God. Among all the things she could do for him, this was the final atonement. Ragna's transformation intensifies and an image of Leonica appears in his mind, indicating that he will forget her just like all the other things that matter in his life. He realizes what is about to happen and reacts by trying to grab Ultimacia, but she manages to move away. Soon he sees his broken blade on the ground and leaps to retrieve it. Zora and Nebulum react to try to stop him. Disaster Thrower begins casting a wind magic spell, but Kamui holds his arm, preventing the magic. Consequently, Ragna manages to lift the broken blade and thrust it into his own heart, piercing his body and removing the blood blade Ultimacia had stabbed him with. He says his life was meaningless, but that he wouldn't let Ultimacia have her way. With the blade in his chest, he falls dead. Members of the lineage realize that Ragna is dead, and some wonder why he didn't accept Ultimacia's kindness. The progenitor admits she was mistaken, and Ragna was not destined to join their lineage. Dying there was his salvation. Disaster Thrower massages his sore wrist and asks what happened. Kenami says he just wanted to enjoy the show. Ultimacia approaches them unnoticed and catches Disaster Thrower's attention, making him startle. She asks him if he can take everyone home through the wind, since wind is not the strong point of the rest of the group. Disaster is embarrassed, turns away from Ultimacia and says of course he can, asserting that the wind is the most grand and elegant means of transportation, especially for a beautiful woman like their progenitor. The monarch smiles and asks a Disaster Thrower to convey her thanks to the wind, and Disaster responds that he will tell it for her. Zora overhears the conversation and comments that Tro is very cute, while Borges mocks, asking when Disaster will be able to talk to the progenitor without acting like a clown. The Wind Dragon begins casting his magic to take the lineage away, but before leaving, Ultimacia tells Kamui that their lineage brings the world closer to what God desires and expresses gratitude to all those who have departed, wishing them to rest in peace. After everything is passed, Slime and Gollum arrive at the battle site. Slime sees Ragna's lifeless body, but being far away, thinks it's just trash someone threw away. Crimson approaches and tells Slime not to touch the body, deciding whether it's garbage or not. Crimson kicks Ragna's body with his foot to look at his back and sees the blade stuck there, realizing that he froze his body to prevent him from becoming a member of the Wind lineage. Crimson asks Golem to carry Ragna back to base, and his servant asks if they will dissect the found body, but Crimson says he will revive the dead because he seems interesting. Back in the capital, Golem tells Crimson that the explosions from the conflict are a true spectacle. He turns to Crimson and asks about the plan, but Crimson is distracted, muttering the word cursed repeatedly when he starts getting more and more nervous, calling Ragna mediocre and saying he escaped his expectations. He begins shouting alone, wondering how, among the millions living in this stupendously large city, they managed to find Ultimacia. He starts questioning if he's cursed. However, he quickly calms down, stating that the original plan was to assess Ragna's power, and if he manages to win, it will still be a victory. If things go wrong, Crimson will handle it. Crimson says that Ragna is really different this time, which shouldn't be a surprise. Camera contacts Crimson, reporting that Borgias destroyed the second wall of the castle in the southern Old District and entered the new district, giving him an advantage. She finishes by saying there is no sign of the superior dragons. Crimson privately wonders if Nebulum is dead, since, just before the battle started, the shield around the capital disappeared. He quickly orders Chimera to return and contact Slime, telling him to go to the nearest location with a delicious scent. Golem informs Crimson that Borgias left the castle, and Crimson asks the servant to deal with the dragon. The man is astonished and asks how that would be possible in his current body, but Crimson simply informs him that there is no time for him to change. Golem regrets not being able to use his combat body because it was limited and dangerous to face a dragon of Borgias' caliber, but he complies with the order. He climbs onto the parapet and timidly says that it may not be possible to kill Borgias, but Crimson replies that he just needs to delay the dragon. Golem reminds Crimson that the installation is complete but hopes not to have to use it and sets off for the mission. Crimson remembers that all the orders he just gave will be useless if Ultimacia does that. Scenes of the fight between Ragna and Ultimacia flash in her mind as she states that she wants to see if Ragna can really press the monarch so much, calling him a mediocre man. Within Crimson's thoughts, the head of the winged monarch appears, questioning if she has already died many times. Almost disintegrated by Ragna's blows, she worries about not having enough time to come back, fearing dying definitively. As she is about to be completely destroyed, Borgias appears, apologizing for the delay. He announces that he will drain all the blood in the castle and fire his cannon. He apologizes again when he warns that his leader will be hit in the explosion because Ragna cannot be defeated without drastic measures. Before he can fire, Borgias is surprised and his cannon is cut in half by an unknown attack. Golem at a distance fired at Borgias' cannon and mocks the dragon, saying Borgias was excited for nothing. Golem jumps and sees Ragna fighting Ultimacia, concluding that he can really defeat her. However, Ragna is surprised by a counterattack from the monarch. Ultimacia casts a restriction barrier on Ragna, preventing him from moving. Nebulum is injured on the ground, noting that the silver's freezing power of this enemy is off the charts, realizing he went from dead to nearly dead. Very weakened, with part of his left arm cut, he tries to motivate himself to endure a few more minutes and struggles to get up. Elaborating a strategy in his mind, he reflects that he just needs to buy enough time for Ultimacia. The monarchs, slowly restoring her body, thanks Nebulum, expressing gratitude, relief, and sadness, announcing that she will go back 3.1 seconds in time. As a precaution, she invokes the repugnant life force that flows from her blood in the form of hundreds of blood dragons and tries to envelop Ragna. Ragna, in turn, reacts with the silver full power, and the restriction barrier begins to break. Nebulum sees the monarch's barrier breaking and realizes he needs to act quickly. He declares that he will sacrifice his life and tries to endure a few more seconds, but Slime calmly approaches and swallows him, giving the restriction barrier enough time to break completely. Despite this, Ultimacia's restoration is complete, and she thanks Nebulum for it. Now she prepares to end the fight. She concentrates to summon creation, but Ragna reacts quickly, hitting her with the silver flight. The monarch's body disintegrates almost completely again, but a vision of Kamui invades her mind. He calls her weak for a dragon monarch, criticizing her for taking 1 to 2/10ths of a second to stop time, saying that in their world, a tenth of a second is the difference between killing and being killed. Ultimacia asks Kamui who they are, referring to his words. Kamui asks if it's not obvious, answering that it's him or anyone else who has reached an insane level of power. With a powerful kick, Ragna throws the rest of Ultimacia's body out of the capital, saying that he doesn't need to hold back anymore, and begins to punch the winged monarch. While the blows happen, Kamui continues to talk to Ultimacia in her mind, saying that if she ever faces someone very strong, he wants to be by her side to support her. But if he isn't there, she should use the foolproof card she has up her sleeve. She just needs to remember and execute the trick. With difficulty, Ultimacia stammers, but soon manages to issue a command with her voice, ordering all of creation to rewind, causing time magic to act once more. Suddenly, we see Ragna opening his eyes with Slime on his shoulders, hearing an announcement from the authorities of the capital about exterminating the invaders from his homeland, restoring peace once again to his people. As the authority speaks, the people go into ecstasy, cheering for the people of Lees while watching dead dragons being displayed for the entire population. Slime claims that these stupid humans are getting too excited, and that he could devour this crowd in 60 seconds. Ragna seems confused and realizes that something is wrong, but he doesn't know what it is or how to act to find out. Ultimacia appears beside him, saying that she has already stopped time and that it takes an enormous amount of magic to turn the world back, so she rarely does it. She concludes that he is a very big threat, so it needed to be done. Ragna was such a big threat that she felt death approaching. That said, she informs him that the battle is over, but quickly corrects herself, saying that the battle hasn't even happened yet. She questions how to deal with him and who he really is, that the deep hatred he felt for her was evident, and wonders when she caused this hatred in him. The monarch laments, thinking that she will never know the reason, and concludes that it is in this inner world that Ragna will face his death head-on. Simply raising her arms, she levitates the entire population of the capital, frozen in time, playing with them as if they were dolls. But she asserts that she won't stoop to cruel killing, even if they are people who disdain God. She continues, saying that when Ragnar was low on brain matter, he was honorable and fought alongside the people, and asks him who the child he carried on his shoulder was, suggesting that Ragnar and Slime had a friendship as Slime was affectionately seated on Ragnar's shoulders. The monarch begins to utter a phrase involving Slime and removing the boy, but before she can finish this threat, Ragnar moves a finger of the hand holding his sword, and the sound of the blade startles the monarch, who steps back a few steps. Unbelieving in what she was seeing, Ultimacia wonders how it's possible for Ragnar to move as she didn't feel time turning back. Nebulum appears in his dragon form and delivers a punch that sinks Ragnar and Slime into the ground. Nebulum's enraged eyes show his hatred as he repeatedly punches the dragon hunter. Even taking these blows, Ultimacia sees that Ragnar is not moving, so she presumed that his movement was just in her head, and she is relieved. She corrects herself, saying that, as a progenitor, she cannot allow such a thing to happen. The monarch approaches Nebulum and asks the dragon to stop his blows, noticing that his arms were covered in various burns. Nebulum's punches and opened a hole in the ground, and in that hole she saw a puddle of the purple liquid. She says that the liquid seems to be an acid that dissolves their bodies, and that this seems to be the true nature of the child. She concludes that it will harm them if they accidentally touch the acid. Nebulum is concerned and questions his progenitor as Ragnar was still alive and was a great threat. Ultimacia agrees but rebuts Nebulum, saying that she has tested various abilities in her last fight against Ragnar, but he broke through all her defenses and her attacks were ineffective against the hunter. Furthermore, she shows the dragon that even though he has now beaten Ragnar without him resisting, no injury was fatal, as if Ragnar's body were a powerful silver sword. Even though Ragnar wasn't wielding silver, she imagines that he carries the source of this power within his own body. His power is incredibly resistant to magic, and it seems that only a magic with world-destroying power would be effective against him. As they are weakened by the sunlight, Ultimacia asserts that it would be difficult to defeat Ragnar in these conditions. Ultimacia contacts Borgias and asks him to deliver a message to King Femid, as she wants the king to unleash the light on Ragnar. She believes that the offensive function of the barrier will be much more effective than a magical attack. Borgias accepts the mission but warns his progenitor. There is at least one more enemy present besides Ragnar. Ultimacia responds that she will deal with him after she deals with Ragnar. The progenitor turns to Nebulum, who is visibly shaken by the difficulty of the situation. She motivates him, saying that she will always depend on him and what is to come will not change that. She asks him to put up a barrier to protect the people in the surrounding area because the range of the light attack may exceed what she can anticipate. Crestfallen, Nebulum understands and withdraws while his leader looks again at Ragnar. She feels strange about it, but she knows that she has developed affection for Ragnar, even though he's an enemy now, as if it were a diluted version by those of her bloodline. As Ragnar killed so many dragons, a monarch feels disloyal for having developed this affection for the hunter, and she promises to forget this feeling when she has killed him. Already resigned to her affection for the enemy, she steps back and wishes that he has a painless and peaceful death, bidding farewell to his paralyzed body. Memories of old duels between Ultimacia and Ragnar emerge from the blood blade she thrust into his heart to the transformation he prevented from taking over his body. Every time he was attacked but never gave up, resisting magics that everyone thought impossible to survive, as if he could move his body only with the strength of his promise to annihilate all the dragons in the world. During one of these memories, Ragnar surprises Ultimacia by standing up after a devastating blow, swearing that he won't let the opponent live. She doesn't believe he is moving during her time control magic. She tries to push him away with magic, but it seems that nothing can hold him. Meanwhile, she remembers that now, in addition to King Lys, the only people in the world that she allowed to move are others who share her blood. In another memory, Crimson appears, saying that the monarch can choose to exempt people from the effects of stopping time, people like the members of her own bloodline. Soon the scene returns to the battle between her and Ragnar, where the hunter can move freely despite time control. Nebulum tries to protect his leader using the strongest enhanced protective barrier he could invoke, but Ragnar easily pierces the defensive magic. Ragnar approaches the winged monarch and asks how she can cower with so many deaths at her hands and attacks her with numerous strikes of his conjured sword, cutting Ultimacia into pieces. She manages to turn back time again, but once again, Ragnar is in full condition to move, which despairs Ultimacia. With Nebulum in her hands, she tries to devise a strategy in her head, but her possibilities seem to run out as all her actions are overcome by Ragnar. Fearing death, she despairs and calls for Camus. Ragnar is about to eliminate his two enemies when he is brutally interrupted and starts bleeding absurdly. He realizes that using too much of his future power had serious consequences on his body, unable to continue the fight and falling to the ground. Controlled by Borgias, King Teets orders the barrier to unleash the Aurora Beam, causing massive damage to the capital. Confident, Borgias asks Nebulum if they manage to defeat the enemy, but he replies that no, stating that there are new enemies. A woman accompanied by a panther approaches Ragna's fallen body, and Nebulum cannot see her face to identify who she is, but is Crimson, in another of her disguises. Borgias asks the progenitor to stop time again, but she is so frightened that she cannot react. Crimson tells Ragna that he lost, that he obeyed his orders but ended up in this lamentable state. Then she turns her head and wonders what she should do with Ragna now. Crimson observes that Ultimacia took an approach focused on combat because for her, battles are merely empty endeavors and tests of strength are wild. However, at the same time, the Queen had utmost confidence in her own time control magic, believing that her power could face any display of brute force. Yet all the assurance she felt was shattered during her fight with Ragna, which left the girl completely destroyed, ceasing to be the winged monarch and becoming only a woman petrified by battle. Crimson wonders what Ultimacia will do now, as this was her opportunity to get rid of the enemy. However, the girl was in shock, and all she could think about was whether there was a problem in the formulation of her magic or if it was the way she was using this power. Nebulum calls out to his queen, trying to make her regain consciousness but without success. Borgias also tries to call her name, even though he's far away, but all the girl can think about is whether she should try to use her magic, even though it failed. In an act of desperation, Ultimacia unleashes a huge light around her. Crimson admires her courage and decides to further destroy the Queen, determined to eliminate any belief that may still linger within her. He then activates a button that causes the entire city to suffer from a massive explosion. Everything begins to crumble and Crimson revels in the scene as it inflicts immense suffering on Ultimacia. All the people whom the winged monarch wished to give a peaceful and painless death ended up meeting a horrible fate of chaos, suffering, and panic, exactly the opposite of what she wanted. Crimson caused massive destruction, aiming to expose what lies behind Ultimacia's mask of compassion. The cries and sobbing of tens of thousands of people were before her, making it impossible to sweep this horrific situation under the rug as she desired. Crimson continues causing destruction, hoping that Ultimacia would take action in the face of such cruelty. The girl panics at the sight of all that suffering and considers using her time control magic to save everyone, but Nebulum prevents her, knowing it's a trap. If she went back in time at that moment, it would deplete all her magical power, leaving her completely defenseless and falling into the hands of the enemy. Realizing that Nebulum thwarted his plan, Crimson decides it's time to retreat. He begins to withdraw along with Chimera, who carries the still unconscious Ragna. Meanwhile, Ultimacia still suffers from the pain of the people before her. Understanding that there is nothing she can do to prevent the devastation, accepting the cruel fate that everyone faced. However, even knowing that people had to die, the girl cries because she wished she could have at least spared everyone the torment. Back to Crimson, he walks through the chaos he caused without showing any reaction, finding his servant Gollum in an alley. He informs that he created a door exactly as Crimson asks and begins to praise his master's actions, stating how impressive he is. Crimson responds to the praise by hitting him in the face with a glass bottle. He says that the Great Clock Tower should also have a bomb implanted and there weren't enough explosions on the castle walls, asking why this happened. Gollum apologizes and explains that there are many places in that area he likes to visit, but Crimson is not pleased with the response and injures his servant again with a glass bottle, saying that if the devastation had been greater and more fatal, Ultimacia could have fallen into the trap and used her magic to go back in time. Gollum apologizes again and thinks that he was afraid Crimson had changed after meeting Ragna for no reason, as he continues to be the same boss as always. After that, Crimson turns the key to a secret door and asks Gollum to get rid of that body to monitor the subsequent movements of the lineage in its base form. Gollum questions his master's order, as that was a task serving only as punishment. However, Crimson maintains his order and instructs his servant to endure the suffering. Next, he enters the door, ending up in a white room with Chimera and Ragna, called the Global Chamber. Meanwhile, Ultimacia still suffers from the pain of the people, and Nebulum wonders what he achieved in that battle, feeling powerless and useless for not having done anything to help his queen. He then remembers a conversation he had with Borgias about the maturation period, called the 13th seat, when someone is not yet a member of the dragon lineage, adapting to their progenitor's blood. Borgias tells Nebulum that the blood of the wing refers to these beings as the 13th seat, and this period roughly measures someone's potential as a lineage member. He explains that Ultozora spent a year in this maturation period, Disistroa only spent a month, and Kamui less than 2 days, while Nebulum didn't even go through this period because his pure aptitude as a lineage member surpasses even that of old Camus. Borgias tells Nebulum that eventually he will become the backbone of the lineage and the main supporter of their progenitor, and the boys should be aware of this and be proud. But at that moment, Nebulum sees no reason to feel proud of himself. After all, he failed to protect his dear queen, and even though he supposedly knows he has the potential to surpass Kamui, he still feels like a failure because he knew they wouldn't be in that situation if Kamui were there. Nebulum then decides to change that and show his strength, preparing to go after Crimson. The dragon feels that Nebulum is looking for him, but even knowing his excellent potential and that his magic can sense that he is in another spatial plane, Crimson remains confident that he cannot be located because he himself created the global chamber during his peak, which is basically a portal connected to all parts of the world. Crimson thinks that even if by some miracle Nebulum manages to locate that place, it's impossible to break through the protection using external forces. He then goes to the portal and reflects that despite things not going as planned, it had a result that exceeded his expectations. Next, Crimson prepares to escape and devise a new plan because for him, there's nothing more to be done for that country. While still unconscious, Ragnar remembers one of the hunts he had with Leo. They were after a dragon, and despite the imminent risk of running into a horde of dragons before dawn, Leo insists it's worth the risk. The creature they were hunting showed potential danger if allowed to live long enough, possibly evolving into a superior dragon. Despite finding the idea of facing a superior dragon fun, it would be irresponsible to let a dragon cause havoc just for the thrill of the fight. Ragnar wakes up extremely weak and struggling to stand. Despite his condition, he gathers the remaining strength, knowing he is in Crimson's teleportation room, refusing to give up the fight without defeating Ultimacia. Crimson tries to calm him, acknowledging the excellent results Ragnar achieved in the battle, proving to be stronger than expected. However, Ragnar doesn't care whether he pleased Crimson or not. All that matters is that the winged monarch is still alive. Ragnar activates his silver power, and Crimson quickly orders Chimera to stop him. She restrains him, and the dragon scolds the boy for attempting to destroy the place when he notices Ragnar cause a small crack in the room. He hurries to use the teleportation, but at that moment, Nebulum appears. Crimson acknowledges underestimating the boy and attempts to escape, but the portal is closed due to damage to the room. Furious, he orders Golem to attack the enemies. His servant outside shoots Nebulum, severely injuring him. However, Borgias retaliates with a massive fireball. Ragnar finally frees himself from Chimera, and he and Nebulum vow not to let the enemy escape. Crimson becomes irritated seeing Ragnar helping the dragons ruin his plan, but the boy doesn't give up the battle, increasingly activating the power within him. Crimson starts to dream of a conversation he had long ago with a girl. She says there won't be peace even after the war, but she would like to continue living with everyone else. A military training field in the northeast of Lys, a princess named Starlia Lys eats dragon meat, reflecting on the absence of dragon attacks. The major calls her and she goes to him. He questions the princess eating dragon meat, but she defends it as retaliation as dragons feed on people. A woman combs her hair while Major Isaac Stern explains that the teleportation circle they prepared underground attracted someone. The princess asks if it's a dragon, but he believes it's not, yet wants her to judge with her own eyes. They have captured Crimson, who, being taken as a prisoner, thinks about their misfortune of being expelled from the glow chamber and ending up in an entirely different exit than expected, blaming Ragnar for their situation. Crimson is taken to where Princess Stalia is. She welcomes him and asks for a detailed explanation of what happened from one of her men Fu. He reports drawing the magic circle, and two guys appeared suddenly. Despite this, there was no damage to the circle and their mission was unaffected. The princess finds humor in the situation but realizes someone else appeared with Crimson and asks where that person is. The Major explains he is in critical condition, not able to speak, but they confirm through a blood sample that he is not a dragon. Isaac allowed the boy to receive medical treatment in exchange for Crimson answering all their questions. Stalia decides to deal with Crimson first, asking him to eat a piece of meat as a sign of goodwill. Crimson is taken aback but can't refuse in that situation. After some time, he thanks her for the food and takes a bite of the meat. Later, the princess reveals that it's dragon meat she hunted herself. Crimson immediately vomits the food, thinking about how strange Starlia is. She was born without arms, but her eyes could sense the aura emitted by all things. Thanks to this ability, since infancy, she could move objects freely, controlling them with her power, even without arms. The first time she did it, she moved a set of cutlery, earning her the title of Princess of Cutlery by her people, who believe she's a miracle granted to the world by the sun god. The girl's fame is so widespread that half the world knows about her. At 6, she defeated 3 lower dragons. At 7, she hid her identity to compete in a combat tournament, which she won. By 8, she killed a horde of dragons, including 2 medium ones. However, the princess didn't stop there. At 9, she thwarted a coup attempt by a general, and after turning 10, she used her special abilities to develop silver equipment, quickly becoming a master craftsman. Currently, at 16 years old, she commands the Argentum Court, a combat unit with equipment she created herself capable of killing even Dornia, a superior dragon. However, Crimson's hatred for Stalia is not related to her strength, but to the fact that she is extremely difficult to deceive. The princess states that she will begin the interrogation and asks Crimson to answer carefully because lies won't fool her. Stalia then asks who he is and how he arrived at that location. Crimson thinks that this is an opportunity to resolve the entire situation since he knows that the Argentum Court is planning to escape the country through the teleportation circle. They are being pursued by Ulto, Zora, and Terratectra, 2 superiors they cannot face, leaving only the option to flee. In this situation, their objective aligns with that of the dragon. The problem is Stalia's starry eye is receptive to aura, which contrary to popular belief doesn't mean silver but all life since all beings produce their own aura. It's challenging to deceive Stalia, who can see changes in aura accompanying the emotions of a being and use this ability to determine the sincerity of people. Crimson thinks that a good way to handle this problem is to include a lot of truth in a small act, though it's quite challenging. It's a way to deceive the princess. He thinks this situation is unfair as he's in it because of Ragna, while the boy sleeps like a baby. Stalia questions Crimson's lack of response, considering whether she should take it into account. He apologizes immediately. The dragon is annoyed with himself for wasting time thinking unnecessarily, but celebrates as Stalia didn't notice his irritation, meaning his plan to deceive her would work. Crimson then reveals his dragon eye to everyone and begins to use his acting talent to deceive the princess's eyes. 7 years ago, we see Princess Steria talking to a lieutenant colonel. The man seems uneasy about the girl's presence and asks what she wants. The princess then says she wants to eliminate him, and that's exactly what she does, with a smile on her face as if it were a child's play. This was the story Crimson learned about her. As this incident was committed publicly, people thought the child was a bit crazy. However, after investigations, it was discovered that the man was an infiltrator from an enemy country preparing a coup. When asked how she knew, Steria simply replied that she only needed to look at a person to know if they should be eliminated. In the present, everyone is surprised by Crimson's dragon eye. Deep down, he knows it was the right choice because these people are familiar with magic. Many humans born or becoming mages have some non-human part in their bodies. In his case, the eye adds credibility to the lie. Faced with a woman capable of sending him to his demise if she suspects anything, there was no other way out of this situation. Crimson introduces himself as Krish Weiss, a mage who hides his identity and works as a pharmacist. When asked about the situation in the capital, he puts on a frightened expression and says everything was going well until there were explosions. While saying this, Crimson controls his emotions, subtly reflecting in his aura, showing that he's afraid and hiding some things. About the capital, he mentions many explosions at once and she doesn't know the current situation because she was trying to evacuate with an injured companion using teleportation magic. Hiding that the explosions were his fault, Krish says it was when they suddenly found themselves in the magic circle. One of the men questions how the mage learned magic since no one does it alone. The guy suggests she deserted the Sun sect, but this aligns with Crimson's script. Now is the time to show some uneasiness. He pretends to be concerned, saying he never belonged to that elite. The guy concludes that he is right, commenting that the sect does not tolerate deserters, so it's no surprise he wants to flee to a country outside their influence. With this, the redhead thinks he has imposed his identity since the Sun sect is the only human faction capable of facing higher-level dragons. This leads him to believe the conclusion of this situation is for them to accept him as an advisor to the group due to his supposed past. However, it won't be that easy. Staria says he lies very well, mixing lies with real facts. She mentions her ability to detect liars because her eyes see a person's aura, perceiving fluctuations caused by strong emotions. This is not true, as with training, aura can be controlled. What she sees is the color of the aura. Honest people have a blue aura and dishonest ones have a red one. This makes it very difficult to deceive her. In Crimson's case, the aura is not red. It's actually very blue, but it smells really bad. This comment surprises Crimson, but he continues trying to talk his way out of this situation. Suddenly, the princess puts the broadsword in front of him and he pretends that she always offers equipment to people who please her. The redhead falls for it and puts his hands on the hilt. However, this confirms what the princess already knew. Staria says she was born without arms but compensates with this silver equipment. The power of the equipment allows her to see people's nature much better than with her eyes. As an example, she talks about the guard next to her, who looks too serious. But that's his true nature. He is too serious. It's so noticeable that it becomes transparent. As for the man in the back named Garm, the sword wolf, who taught the princess to fight, she sees that the sword and the man seem to be one, the result of years of training. With all this, she concludes that a person's true nature encompasses all their experiences and cannot be hidden. About Krish's nature, when she looked through the sword, Steria only saw death and darkness. Having said that, the girl asks how many people Krish has eliminated and also determines that the explosions in the capital were caused by the mage. Crimson tries to deflect, but it doesn't work. Also, there's no way to seek intercession from the princess's followers as they are entirely subservient to her. Steria prepares to attack, saying she is happy to have met this person and to be able to eliminate her. Outside, Crimson screams in despair, but inside he is fine because there's no way to die anyway. After the elimination, he can hide in their base and wait for the opportunity to escape with Ragna. Suddenly, when the broadsword is about to hit Crimson, Ragna appears and holds the blade with one hand. He says he won't let them take his prey and throws the sword aside. Despite not knowing what's happening, Crimson thinks Ragna has messed up something again. At this moment, the nerd wonders how the boy managed to infiltrate and notices Garm lying there. Out of nowhere, the princess also falls to the ground, completely astonished. While the governess tries to help her maintain composure, Ragna asks what Crimson did to the princess, but the redhead says this time it's on him. Anyway, the guy thinks he didn't do anything either. The truth is, the princess sees Ragna as a giant sword with arms and legs. This infuriates the followers and they attack, but for Ragna, it's not even a challenge. Steria is still impressed that he merged with the silver aura, a sign that he is beyond the peak of swordsmanship. Seeing how the princess looks at Ragna, the governess recalls when she announced the end of the detention after the incident years ago, and the girl revealed that she barely noticed the time passing while forging a sword on her own. While the girl boasts of having a talent for forging, the woman says the incident scared off all the princess's suitors. Steria doesn't care because she never intended to marry, but the governess has the duty to take care of the princess's education. She feels like she's training a wild animal. The truth is, when the girl gets married, she will receive a handsome reward and will be able to enjoy life the way she deserves, saying that the girl suggests finding an absolutely incredible suitor for her if the governess is so eager to see her married. Back to the present, that's exactly what the princess sees in Ragna, admiring his muscles and scars in addition to the silver aura. She acknowledges that she has never seen someone so powerful and serene at the same time. Despite seeing a sword in place of a head, she finds his face very beautiful. Blushing, the girl tries to ask the governess for advice, saying that this man is magnificent. The nerd thinks it's just a joke or that the man enchanted the princess. Crimson is also surprised. When Ragna tries to talk to the girl, she hides, thinking she was staring too much at him and that it might seem strange. She still seeks help from the governess, but the woman is also somewhat lost. Suddenly, the guy starts speaking like a caveman, but it's because he's just repeating what Crimson is saying in his ear. Thus, he ends up saying that he doesn't intend to fight and will follow all orders as long as no one else tries to eliminate the redhead. With that, the duo ends up in a cell. They take the opportunity to talk, but in Crimson's way, with his foot on Ragna's head. The redhead asks why the guy ruined his plan, and Ragna says he didn't want to escape because as long as Ultimacia lives, innocent people will continue to die, so he needs to defeat Ultimacia soon. Anyway, the redhead says it was time to escape and also mentions that Ragna messed everything up, destroyed his hideout, and now no one knows where Gollum and Chimera are. When Crimson asks how he plans to fix all this, Ragna responds that it will be by eliminating Ultimacia. Crimson steps even harder on the guy's head, who says it's starting to hurt. He then says he's just restoring the flow of his aura as Ragna exerted himself too much in the previous fight. Having said that, the guy thanks Crimson because when he recovers, he can return to battle. Crimson complains about the guy's stubbornness. Suddenly, Ragna asks about the slime. In fact, Crimson forgot about the servant but quickly reconstructs it faster than preparing instant noodles. The guy is confused but happy to see Crimson's face. He says it shrank and weakened because of Ragna, who apologizes. Now the question is where they are exactly. Crimson explains that it is a military base in the north of Reese, installed in the complex of a lost civilization. However, the residents are in a dangerous situation, and the explanation might discourage them from returning to the capital. Meanwhile, civilians complain about the situation to the guards. They want to know what's happening and want to see the princess. The truth is, these people were brought without explanation and are living confined. This could turn into a riot. The nerd says it was better to bring them to prevent them from falling into the trap of going to the capital. But leaving that aside, the nerd wants the other guy not to tell anyone about the intruders. It turns out that the mage the princess condemned to immediate death and the warrior who defeated Garm in the blink of an eye are too powerful and can shake the morale of the troops. The guy asks for payment for his silence, but the nerd refuses to bribe a colleague. Suddenly, another duo appears running to ask about Garm's defeat. It was him who told them when they found him crying in a corridor. Since Garm is the most powerful swordsman in the kingdom, losing to a young man must have been a big psychological shock. The shorter one, named Shin, gets excited to face the person who defeated Garm. The nerd tries to force them to make the reports before saying anything, but he doesn't have much authority with these guys. Suddenly, two blonde girls appear asking about the princess being in love with the intruder, and it seems that Ragna is the talk of the moment. The princess, on the other hand, is indeed thinking about the swordsman when the governess rebukes her with a slap. This is to show how distracted she is by passion, since she should have easily avoided the attack. Before admitting, the princess says the woman's muscles have atrophied her brain and compares her to a gorilla. The governess proceeds with another attack and tells the girl to admit it. Staria continues to compare Ragna to a sword and is surprised to be attracted only by a man's appearance. The woman says it doesn't matter the reason, the fact is that she found love. However, the Silver Brigade is powerful and managed to gather a strong group, uniting soldiers, guards, dragon hunters, mages, and assassins under the same banner, all because of the princess's leadership. Passion should not be harmful, but only if Staria does not neglect her responsibilities, as the world needs a figure ready to shine under this burden. Upon hearing this, the girl declares herself as such a figure. In the meantime, Ultimacia is having a vision in which she apologizes to the deity for being defeated. Soon, the girl transforms into her sister, asking why she wasn't saved. She wakes up from this nightmare and tries to use her time control power, but can only freeze for a few seconds. In the base the Silver Brigade gathers, Princess Staria requests reports from the blonde, Christopher, and the short one, Shin. They begin explaining that the dragons are acting strangely. There has been no activity until this morning, but it doesn't seem like they have malicious intentions. They got close to the dragons and noticed that the creatures wouldn't immediately attack if a signal were given. The twins remark that it feels as if the creatures are occupied and resembles a funeral. After careful thought, Staria suggests it's a good opportunity. She believes the dragons don't intend to let them escape, or they would have lifted the siege already. Some problem must have affected the higher-ranking dragons. She asks the girl with bangs, Majorca Abbott, how long it will take for the teleportation circle to be ready. The girl replies that according to Fu, it will take 1 day if everyone works themselves to death, but realistically, it will take 2 days. Upon hearing this, the princess orders them to finish in 1 day without anyone going to the base. She also declares that the country has already lost. On the first night, the capital and 5 more cities fell. No one knows how many citizens were devoured by dragons. The only option now is to escape with the 1,500 citizens gathered in this place, despite it being shameful. It's a way to show the dragons they can't always do as they please. She concludes the speech with a motivational phrase. At this moment, the dew of prisoners arrives, with Crimson sarcastically praising the speech. With the princess mortified, Shin and Christopher confront Ragna, but the nerd tries to downplay the situation. He advises everyone to behave. Assessing the skill level of this group, Ragna concludes that there are people even stronger than Leo in this place. When the nerd asks about the guards of the cell, Crimson says he asked them to let them pass, and they kindly agreed. Getting straight to the point, the redhead says he would like to help with the escape plan. He knows the intention is to use dragon blood as a source of magical energy for teleportation, and despite being a solid plan, it won't work. He explains that the enemy's military power is much greater. Crimson ends by saying he can provide information about the dragons, and better yet, can provide a super weapon capable of taking down superior dragons alone, which is the Reaper Ragna. Furthermore, if they don't cooperate, everyone in this place will probably meet their end. The princess is completely paralyzed by Ragna, leading to a discussion where all brigade members speak at the same time. The tutor finally knocks the girl on the table with a blow, bringing her back to her senses, and she dismisses Crimson's words as nonsense. As she approaches, she leaves a board between the prisoners. Shin loses patience and asks if they should finish off Ragna. He looks behind the wood to try to talk to her, and Staria becomes embarrassed again. Crimson then seizes the opportunity to mention that the Mad Maestro, Ultozora's main role is to manage and lead military affairs. His power is chemical synthesis. He can create potent substances that eliminate or hypnotize targets through changes in his own blood. Moreover, Ulto can spread the compounds like a mist, covering a large area. However, these chemicals neutralize instantly in sunlight, and silver can also stop them. Another piece of information is that he can use his ability on his own forces, making them much stronger and maintaining total control through hypnosis. Staria says there is no guarantee that this information is true. Even with her ability, she prefers to be suspicious of Crimson. He then brings Ragna into play, as Crimson is entirely incompatible with the princess, so Ragna has a much better chance of convincing her. In a flashback, the Dew in the cell discusses the situation. Crimson calculates that at least 10,000 dragons will attack the base transported by the Twisted Shadow, and the leaders will be the superior dragons Ultozora and Terratectra. The base has only 350 soldiers to protect the 1,500 civilians, meaning no one will survive. To confirm this prediction, Crimson asks if Princess Silverware and her companions were in Ragna's future. Crimson's proposal is for Ragna to forget Ultimacia for now so they can escape the country. Ragna will do what he can to ensure the humans in this base escape the dragons. The decision is Ragna's. In the present, Ragna shows he has already made his decision when he begins talking to the princess. He mentions the insults she directed at Crimson, agreeing with all of them, calling him despicable and worse. Despite everything, the only thing to trust about Crimson is his desire to slay dragons, and that's why they joined forces, to exterminate all dragons. Furthermore, Ragna introduces himself as the world's best dragon hunter and asks to be used by the princess. The princess is taken aback, but her expression reflects the effort she's making not to scream yes in response to the request from the man she has fallen in love with. Finally, she manages to hold back and speak seriously, agreeing to the proposal but making it clear that it's all for strategic purposes and has no sentimental motive behind it. With this scene, Crimson bursts into laughter and then praises Ragna's move despite thinking he went too far with the insults. Steria's followers are unsure if this is the right decision, but the girl is entirely determined. Crimson is excited to finish off these dragons and says he will modify the plan. However, Steria states that Crimson's function will be simply to provide information about the dragons, and she will be the one to plan everything. Crimson says that's a great relief but advises her to be careful not to leave holes in the plan for him to fill later. Setting that aside, the girl asks if Crimson knows what caused the dragons change an hour ago. The redhead then says it's because they fought the winged monarch in the capital. It's probably causing a commotion, making them run to the capital. In the meantime, Ultozora and Terratectra attack Bogios to inquire about the current location of the progenitor. We then see Ultimacia being visited by Woltakamui, who, with a head in hand, comments that she lost control of time and mentions the unpredictable power gained from another person. Ultimacia asks how he got through Nebulum, and he says Nebulum let him in without any issues. Then he extends the head for her to recognize him as the leader of the warriors who eliminated Troa. Woltakamui comments that the man wasn't very strong but had a good end. He wants to reveal the words the warrior said before being eliminated, but Ultimacia isn't interested in the last words of someone who met a cruel fate. Woltakamui, who sees no value in anyone, says the man was weak but remained a dragon hunter until the end. Anyway, since she doesn't want to know, he decides to keep it to himself. Suddenly, he grabs a sword and offers it to her, saying he took it from one of the dragon hunters. Ultimacia is startled, while Woltakamui mentions that he has to make an effort not to get a numb hand while holding the object. The monarch asks him to remove the sword, but he is so persistent that without realizing it, she takes the object and delivers a strike, leaving a vertical silver mark. He then comments that she is holding the sword. Upon realizing this, Ultimacia feels the chill of the object and immediately lets go. Now Woltakamui begins to talk about the reason she can no longer control time, a simple thing. She lost it in her heart. He explains that magic is a way to change the world and requires 3 things: magical power to create change, a process that gives direction to the change, and confidence to control the change after it has occurred. It's a mental block, and he suggests that she probably visualizes the enemy mentally when trying to use the power. The monarch mentions that the enemy could move even when she stopped the world. Woltakamui confesses that he doesn't know why the opponent didn't stop, but the reason she can no longer stop the world is that she lost it in her heart. It's basically trauma. Hearing this shocks Ultimacia, who wonders what she must do to regain the use of time control magic. Woltakamui then responds that she needs to forget the fear, giving the example of the sword that frightened her but that she suddenly took without hesitation to attack him. At that moment, the monarch forgot about the fear because of the anger she felt. Despite the explanation, she says it's not that easy when it comes to this trauma. Thus, Woltakamui tells her to command him to destroy the source of her fear. Ultimacia is silent, while he insists and asks what she wants him to do until she decides not to give that command. She determines that losing the ability is simply her personal failure, so she cannot use her greatest weapon, Woltakamui, to regain the power. Now the priority is to destroy this country, so that the world can be shaped according to God's will. This is her only function as the winged progenitor. With this, Woltakamui tells her to say what she really wants, which is revenge. The monarch is a bit confused, and suddenly, he puts her in bed and says he will tell her what he really wants first. He says he is furious that someone tried to eliminate his woman while he was away. Ultimacia then takes the sword and hits him again because of the bold comment. Enraged, she continues attacking and says that if he doesn't intend to listen to her, he can go fight. However, he says he wants to fight under her orders. He won't lower himself because she's the progenitor or worship her like a saint. He only sees the monarch as an unbalanced woman who he follows by his own will, not caring about divinity or loyalty to their lineage. Ultimacia can act however she wants with him, whether furious, childish, or dramatic. He will always endure and remain by her side. As for the progenitor, she doesn't think she can allow that, as she has duties to God and the lineage, besides the people they exterminated. Obliterate takes advantage to say that his interest is in hearing what she wants him to do. The monarch starts crying and ends up asking for their heads, as she can't stand this situation anymore. She doesn't find it fair that they are still alive after the suffering they cause. So that's the order. She really speaks like an unbalanced person. Obliterate takes the sword and squeezes it so hard that it breaks, finally saying that her wish is his command. Badu leaves the room to Nebulim's joy. Zora, already on site with Terratectra, receives a hug from the progenitor. She takes the opportunity to ask if Nebulim is okay, still thinking that Obliterate used brutality to get in. While the two argue about what really happened, Nebulim confirms that he let him in without any issues since, in that state of the progenitor, only Obliterate could help. Meanwhile, Obliterate himself remembers the hunter saying that the Reaper would come after him. This gets him excited to fight Ragna because when they face each other, it will be a deadly battle that will go down in history. So, Ragna infuses the sword and hands it over to Princess Starlia for a test. She asks Ike to strike the weapon with his sword, but he only manages to crack it in half. Everyone around is astonished by such resistance, and Christopher comments that it was indeed a surprise. With that, we see Crimson placing hands on Ragna's shoulder, asking the boy to witness what this sword can do, as it was only infused with a bit of silver. The princess asks if this effect lasts for a long time, and the protagonist explains that it diminishes as the sword is used. The power of silverine tends to deteriorate weapons it touches over time, but due to the high quality of this particular sword, the princess won't need to worry about that. Starlia responds that of course the sword won't break because it's one of her best creations, and she adds that his silverine is decent enough. Hearing the conversation, Ike comments that at least the boss learned to talk like a human with this kid. Starlia defends herself, saying that she's only saying these things for military purposes and that it has nothing to do with any kind of sentiment. And Ragna, not understanding anything, just says okay, while Ike says that's a bizarre way to deal with it. So the princess decides to bring all the weapons to Ragna. After that, the anime jumps to March 8th, where Ragna is training with the Silver Brigade, facing various opponents from the battalion. As Ragna defeats his opponents effortlessly, the others become increasingly furious. Despite winning without any effort, he questions if it's really worth training with infused weapons, recalling that Crimson once advised him to save half for personal use and the rest for infusing the corporation's weapons. Moreover, he said that Ragna won't use the silverine battle arts in the next battle because nothing good could come from it. Ragna acknowledges that he's not in the best physical condition, but it's not like he's disabled or anything. Since he has to face numerous dangers alone, why couldn't he use this ability? Speaking of things he doesn't understand, he wonders why all these people are attacking him with such anger when he hasn't done anything to make them nervous. Meanwhile, one of the members of the Princess Cutlery Appreciation Club is in tears, wondering what the commander sees in that stupid boy. Over time, more people become enraged with Ragna, while he just wants to end it quickly and return to his cell. Until Shin Cutlass, the chief swordsman, appears. Full of arrogance, he approaches Ragna, boasting that he's not like those amateur swordsmen. However, he is quickly defeated with a single blow, and a second later he's lying on the ground like a rotten banana. Interestingly, Ragna recognizes that the opponent was strong since he couldn't even infuse silver against him. And within his mind, he reflects that this Shin guy is on the same level as Leo, if not a few levels above. Embarrassed by the defeat, Shin runs away from the fight in tears, shouting that he doesn't need Ragna's pity. At that moment, Majorca Abbott is in the circle, egging on the next person to enter the ring, until someone punches her on the head to make her stop talking nonsense. In an isolated corridor, Christopher scolds the two warriors sitting down for being advanced swordsmen crying like children. Shin gets annoyed and says he's not crying, but Christopher continues to provoke. So the dual-sworded boy tells the blonde to go into the fight since he's so good. Calmly, he replies that he has already lost and received his silver-infused weapon. After all, powerful warriors need powerful weapons. With his new equipment, he feels like he could cut a superior dragon like butter. To mock the man, Shin responds that there is a big difference between being strong with a strong weapon and becoming strong just because of it. But Christopher doesn't let it go and says he knows what the boy is feeling because Ragna is extremely powerful, even at such a young age, stronger even than the commander, making Shin feel the difference between effort and natural talent. Shin threatens to yell, but Garm Ulban interrupts the discussion and states that Ragna doesn't have natural talent. In fact, it's the opposite. Despite their brief fight, the old man felt that this defeat was Ragnar's greatest achievement in training a man without talent, and that this feeling is unmistakable. Then the blonde discovers the reason the old man is sad because he thought it was because the princess had fallen for that boy. The old man, even sadder, recalls that this is painful too. With that, Shin gets up and declares that he's tired of these two old farts crying over spilled milk, so he decides to challenge Ragnar again as he doesn't want to be the bystander behind a glorious hero on the battlefield. By nightfall on the same day, the twin sisters Greya and Hesela are questioning Ragnar about what he thinks of Miss Leah, and in the background, Shin had just been defeated for the 7th time. Ragnar responds that he doesn't have a formed opinion about this woman since he just met her. Still, they keep bothering him, saying that you can still have an opinion about someone even if you've known them for a short time, like finding the person attractive or ugly. For example, Aunt Leah thinks Ragnar is handsome. With that, the scene shows that each one has their hand on their holster. Trying to argue, Ragnar explains that his face is covered in bandages, so there's no way the princess can know if he's good-looking or not. But he goes further, stating that he's uglier than hitting your own mother, and this fact is making him increasingly worried. With that said, the girls respond that he only speaks the truth under pressure and draw their weapons. Thus, they ask the boy to infuse their bullets with silver. Without paying much attention to the request, Ragnar thinks that the two are the same age as Leo until slime in miniature suddenly appears on his head, asking where that dragon smell is coming from. Ragnar scolds his friend, asking if it's really a good idea for him to appear like this, while the twins think slime is a cute gnome. Later, they ask what his name is, and the boy replies that it's Evil Slime, saying that the twins look more like dragons than humans because of those eyes and teeth. With this, Ragnar realizes instantly that the mood of the girls has changed, and the two invite the innocent Slime to eat some tasty snacks. Slime agrees, but only if it's a snack dragon, and asks to be taken to a snack bar in Onshi, so they fulfill the boy's wish. As everyone moves away, Ragnar feels an uncomfortable sensation that you will never see Slime healthy and in good spirits again. Then the twins take Slime to a dark storage room and close the door, while the boy asks where the dragon is. In response, they tell him that they have no memories of their parents. Their first memories were of being in a freak show in a circus, and they were an attraction known as the Dragon Descendant Twins. The two were treated very poorly by society. Growing up in such a hostile environment, they became emotionally stunted, losing the meaning of humiliation. This means they don't feel anger from Slime's insults, but they chose on their own to get nervous. However, the twins say that they won't kill Slime, but rather play a prank on him. Far away, Master Fu reflects that magical powers are the means to direct the changes they create, and with a trick, he conjures fire into his hands. However, there are other methods to shape the world. He reflects that for those who master the method, there are various ways to manifest a kind of power. For example, superior dragons are masters of the most powerful form of magic, and the blood that runs in their veins is a form of magical expression. Simply by imagining the change they desire, they can conjure the magic they are thinking of, which is why they are powerful, to the point where thaumaturgy tries to imitate them. Magical circles are shaped from the flow of dragon blood. The center of the circle is the heart, and magic circulates through the veins. The more knowledge the magic bearer accumulates, the more powerful they become. This is the call of the thaumaturge. After all this reflection, the scene cuts again to him, frustrated with something, but sitting at a table with several thaumaturges like him. At this table, everyone discusses that their teleportation method is malfunctioning, and each one offers a more foolish solution than the other. Meanwhile, the leader observes his subordinates and laments that their brains have turned into pancakes from working day and night. Therefore, he suggests that everyone use imagination and creativity to overcome the teleportation problem, as recent research has led nowhere. However, one of the subordinates reminds them that the dragons are supposed to arrive tomorrow, so there's a risk that there won't be time to fix the circles. Until Crimson appears at the table and explains that he is there because Fu needs him to solve this little problem they are having. After that, in an isolated field, Ultozora comments to Terratectra that he didn't understand when a foolish woman claimed she would save him from suffering. Nevertheless, it happened exactly as she said. The fire of hatred burning within him was extinguished. While having these memories of when he was human, he regrets not feeling the emotions that should accompany those memories. The only thing he feels is a deep affection for the Dragon Monarch, who stole everything precious to him. And the most shocking part of all this is that he doesn't even feel ashamed to admit it. So he turns to Terratectra, who once was Arnaldo, and asks what he thinks of all this. The other dragon replies that there's one thing that hasn't changed. They are still warriors and comrades in arms. Having said that, he decides to swear never to experience the humiliation of losing his sovereign again, even if it is the Dragon Monarch who stole this human sovereign. Whether man or dragon, that doesn't change his purpose or his way of living. As Terratectra speaks, we are going back to the past, where he and Zora discuss the plan. Ulta remembers that there are two things that need to be done: destroy this country and kill Reaper and his friends for daring to attack Tia. Watching the conversation, Ulta Kamui interrupts the reasoning and calmly states that they don't need to worry about Reaper and his friends because he will handle them alone. But Zora shows disbelief and calls his companion stupid for thinking that way, since Tia is without her time control powers and weakened. If she dies, it will be the end of all dragons. Therefore, facing all enemies with only one member is foolish. But Kamui remains confident, and while insulting Zora as stupid and other things, he responds that he doesn't take orders from him and reminds that the queen asked him to deliver the heads of the enemies. Then Ulta Zora turns to the monarch and asks if this is really true. Ultimacia regrets and confesses that she gave that order but starts to back down, causing Wolt Kamui's revolt. The second in the lineage asks the princess if that heated discussion they had in bed meant nothing, and the princess, embarrassed, responds that she wasn't in her right mind at that moment. Zora interrupts and asks what kind of talk that is, and Wolt Kamui retorts that he doesn't owe an explanation to any old witch. Interrupting the fight, Nebulon comments that they don't need to look for the enemy because they will come to them. Zora asks how he knows that, and the boy responds that it's just a battle intuition. As he speaks, memories of his fight against Ragna invade his mind, making him affirm with hatred that he will protect the princess at all costs. To provoke, Zora praises the boy's courage and comments that he has finally become a little man. Shortly after, he points his finger at Kamui's face and shouts that he should follow the same example. Kamui doesn't like it and calls the other a gothic witch, starting another fight between the two. Ultimacia interrupts the discussion and asks if Kamui and Nebulum stay, who will destroy the country, since fulfilling God's determinations is more important than her own life. Boldly and shaking his silky hair, Ulta Zora says to leave it to him, but asks the queen to understand that he no longer intends to be merciful with humans. The original plan was to gather as many humans as possible in the capital and have Nibu's barrier erase them all without suffering or fear. After doing this in the capital, they would move on to the next city and do the same. But this would not be possible without some dose of violence. Convinced by the argument, Ultimacia decides not to question the methods of the lineage. From then on, it was without mercy. This response satisfies Zora, but he continues to recite the plan, saying that they should order the 40,000 inferior and median dragons in this country to attack the enemies. However, to calm his commander's anxiety, he says that despite everything, control will be maintained through a medial dragon. Then he declares that he and Tara will deal with the Princess of Cutlery and delegates Borgias to lead the dragon squadron as long as he doesn't kill everyone, because they need to find out who attacked Tia. Having said that, Kamui asks if they are forgetting something. Then he supposes that perhaps Reaper is working with the Argentum Corps, but Zora replies that if that's the case, he will call Kamui, and the guy needs to appear at the speed of light. Meanwhile, Borgias reflects on how half of his lineage went down the drain, but the remaining members are all reliable and capable of protecting the progenitor today and always. Until Zora turns to Tara and asks him to join the discussion, then the dragon completes that they must see themselves as members of the progenitor's body, and none of these members can be missing under any circumstances for her health. Having said that, he laments that the lineage has already suffered a huge humiliation by losing half the group and demands that none of those present die under any circumstances. And above all, that everyone fulfills their mission. In a warehouse, Princess Starlia demonstrates a magical technique that forms a cage from silver pieces. This technique is supposedly effective against dragons, making it difficult for them to move around. Putting that aside, Ike takes the opportunity to ask the princess for her opinion on what Krish Weiss said about defeating 3 of the superior dragons at once and battling the monarch dragon in the capital. Upon hearing this, the princess mentions Ike's vision problem metaphorically, stating that everything Krish said is clearly a mix of truths and lies. Therefore, one should not be distracted by non-essential information. Ike accepts the advice but reveals that there's something he can't ignore: what the redhead said about the superior dragons once being human and gaining their powers through the monarch's blood. According to Crimson, even Ulto Zora and Terratectra were once famous human warriors. Regarding this, the princess confirms it as true, stating she had suspected it as well. She uses the twins Majorca and Fu as examples, saying that individuals born with high levels of magical power often have non-human characteristics, and the more powerful they are, the more pronounced these characteristics become. So the question remains about the fact that the highest order dragons are so similar to humans. They are not imitating humans, but rather humans who have become dragons. Contemplating this, Ike is apprehensive about the upcoming battle, but Starlia says it's easier to fight when dealing with a different species. After all, humans hunt other animals for food, so they shouldn't worry about this information about the superior dragons. The fact that they were once human only gives more reason for this conflict, so Ike should not hesitate. These are the enemies that must be eliminated for their survival. Meanwhile, Ragna wakes up from a nightmare and asks Crimson what time it is. The redhead replies that it's 3 a.m. on the 9th day. The two then catch up on each other's progress, both doing well in their respective roles, especially Crimson, who believes he helped the magicians significantly with the teleportation circle issue. Leaving that aside, he mentions that Ragna is wondering why he advised against using Silverine battle arts, a silver art. But before answering, he asks if Ragna could defeat Woltekemwi if they fought right now. With some difficulty, Ragna admits that he couldn't. Crimson is relieved because his partner at least has that much sense. Woltekemwi is formidable even among the superior dragons, so it's better for Ragna not to confront him at this moment. Moreover, this is the reason for not being able to use Silverine battle arts. The adversaries already know Ragna is a human emitting Silverine from his body, and a common superior dragon wouldn't stand a chance against him. If they discover Ragna's location, Ulta Zoro won't hesitate to call Kamui, who will undoubtedly appear instantly. In the current situation, that would be a certain defeat. Therefore, Ragna's only option is to try to save as many people as he can. Meanwhile, Ike descends a ladder and enters a corridor. When he finds Fu acting strangely and asks who the woman is that ended up making this circle much better. Ike thinks it's good. However, Fu feels humiliated because, in their interaction, Crimson proved to be much more intelligent than him without any arrogance. The circle has improved so much that Fu no longer feels like it's his creation. Back in the cell, the twins return the poor, shattered Mr. Slime to Ragna. After going through all this humiliation, the little one becomes quite sad because he lost the pride of being a superior life form above humans and dragons and having gone through all that. Ragna didn't even know Slime had any sense of pride, but Crimson soon arrives in the cell and asks why the guy returned to this place. Ragna says he can only relax in this location. In any case, Crimson confirms whether the guy saved half of the Silverine in his body and tells him to infuse all the remaining in a single weapon for him to use. In this case, he just needs to take a sword from the princess, but must do it as deep as possible underground to avoid drawing attention from the lineage. Before Crimson leaves, Ragna asks to talk to Mr. Slime, who is in bad shape. What the redhead does is slap him so hard that the little creature splats on the ground and then gets up all happy, as if it doesn't remember anything. The wizard confirms that only a good hit is needed for Slime to forget any bad memories. That said, he tells Slime to keep an eye on Ragna until the end of the imminent battle. Next, the wizard says that the battle will probably start around sunset, so it's good to prepare as quickly as possible. Before leaving, the princess appears. She asks Crimson about the people who were suddenly becoming discontented but have calmed down, but the wizard says he knows nothing. Anyway, there's also something the girl wants to discuss with Ragna alone. He follows her through a corridor, and then she says that normally she would prefer to create a weapon just for him. Unfortunately, time is short, so he'll have to settle for one of the ones she presents to him. Ragna praises the quality of the swords, and the girl boasts that even though they are mass-produced, she made them. In any case, there's something she needs to tell him before the battle starts. Meanwhile, the tutor secretly observes that the girl is meeting alone with the man she likes. Starlia tells Ragna that after the battle, she will join the Solarians. Even if the plan succeeds and they escape with all the soldiers and civilians, the future would be uncertain because it's difficult to feed more than 1,000 people in an unknown country. So the only way to solve this is to become a member of the Solarian Church and become a dragon hunter so that in return, they protect her people. Ragna then asks if she knows what the Solarians are like, and the princess responds that they tried to recruit her once. She was not pleased with the offer and refused, but the situation is different now. The problem is that if she loses her life in this battle, people will have no future even if they manage to escape the country. That said, she decides to ask Ragna that if she doesn't survive, he should join the Solarians in her place and lead her people and the soldiers. Of course, the boy isn't obligated to do this, but Starlia pleads with him to grant this request, and in return, she can do anything the guy asks. Ragna immediately refuses because he doesn't like this religion, so she'll have to become the dragon hunter on her own. The girl says she couldn't do it, and this leaves Ragna wondering why she's acting as if death is certain. Starlia says she has always lived based on her intuition rather than common sense, and that's what made her who she is today. Deep down, she recalls that since they began facing the blood of the wing, she has had this premonition that she is destined to die at the base, but she doesn't want to show this weakness. Therefore, she says that as a commander, it's natural to prepare for this kind of situation. Now changing her stance, the princess becomes more authoritative, abandoning the desire to make him like her. She points her swords at the guy and comments on him, saying that she could use him. So the guy is her subordinate in this battle and must obey her. With this, Ragna thinks about how incredible the princess is. During battles, he rarely thinks about dying at the base, and when he does, He imagines that it would be okay if it happened. The princess, on the other hand, is fully prepared for the worst, making him see her as much more capable than he is. And finally, as he always wanted people like her to survive in his place, in response, Ragna uses Silverine's battle arts, putting the rest of his power into the three swords, and says that Ulto Zora, Terra Tectra, and the dragon army will perish before his blades. Almost crying, the princess suddenly flies away, leaving Ragna confused. The tutor asks what's happening, and the girl says that her swords are completely unworthy in the face of his effort. With all this, and after the compliments, the girl feels completely humiliated, but this increases her determination not to kick the bucket so soon, to still get stronger and forge great swords. When the dragons start to appear, the citizens of the capital wonder why the creatures are coming out of the royal palace, and soon the attack begins. For some reason, the soldiers remain motionless and then start firing at the population. It turns out they are all under the control of Ulto Zora. Even the sword-wielding hunters end up being hit. From the people on the ground, red lines of energy begin to rise to the sphere of the Borgias dragon, which has already started to regenerate its body. Through a vision beyond reach, the progenitor observes the entire massacre with a sad face. She remembers Borgias' request to feed on these humans, and that about 500,000 would be enough, but all of this would be so he can give his own life for the progenitor. Besides, Nebulin would take on the role of commanding the beasts, a good opportunity for him to gain experience. Anyway, the ancient dragon knows he won't live for much longer, so this is a chance to use the remainder of his life for the monarch. Moreover, after surviving the madness of the ancient monarch and the destruction of the lineage, Borgias lived only with the desire to see the lineage restored, and this wish was fulfilled by the progenitor. With this, Woltakemui appears totally insensitive and says to let the old man do whatever he wants. He even supports this line of thinking. Back in the present, at the base, the sun is already setting and the Silver Brigade is gearing up for the arrival of the enemies. With a few words from Ulto Zora, tentacles emerge from the ground, and the princess realizes that the barriers she had placed in the earth have been broken. Despite it being a massive attack, she believes the base can withstand it. However, at that moment in the sky, Terra Tectra appears in its dragon form. It begins to descend, and Starlia is on the verge of despair, but she remembers a tip from Crimson to counter this attack. The impact causes minimal damage, while Ulto was certain it would explode the cliff. Through mental communication, Terra Tectra states that it was neutralized just before the collision. We see Ragna standing at the edge of the fissure formed by the collision, and it's revealed that it was the swords emitting the Silverine that halted the attack. They still don't know that this is the Reaper they fear so much, so Ulto refrains from calling Kamui. Terra Tectra asks for the warrior's name, and internally the warrior reflects on being terrible at talking to people but hating to speak with dragons. Thus, the response is silence. With that, Terra Tectra decides to communicate through violence. In the base, Ike, the guy with glasses, waits for the arrival of the enemies along with the rest of the Silver Brigade behind the bright protective barrier. Instead of dragons coming out of the hole in the wall, humans with zombie-like appearances enter. They explain that they were brought to serve as food for the dragons but managed to escape. The people request shelter and plead with the soldiers not to shoot as they continue to approach. It's at this moment that Ike recalls Crimson talking about Ulto Zora's chemical synthesis power enabling the hypnosis of victims. He tells the others not to lower their weapons, but now the zombies are too close for long-range combat, leaving only close-quarters combat. Nevertheless, the brigade manages to defend well against the zombified foes. Ike is no exception but hesitates when a child zombie appears to attack him. Luckily, Princess Staria shows no mercy and takes out all the advancing invaders. She takes the opportunity to say that they can only save the lives of the civilians they are defending and the soldiers beside each of them. Anyone beyond those mentioned must be eliminated without mercy, or she will have to do it herself. The speech works and the soldiers start attacking fiercely. Staria leaves Ike in charge of the base while she calls the twins, Chris and tutor Nazarena, to join her in attacking the forest. In the distance, Ulto Zora is impressed with the princess's actions, but he comments that everything is going as planned. He intends to give a lesson on the battlefield, but the lessons will cost the princess her life. Meanwhile, we learn more about the superior dragons, also known as mature lineage members. Talent is usually measured by the maturation time, with faster maturation indicating greater power. The average is 10 to 15 years, and the quickest ones are ready in just 1 year, while Terra Tectra, for example, took 20 years. During the fight against Ragna, we discover that he doesn't have much talent as a lineage member, but he accumulated significant power during his time as a human. Using Silverine-infused swords, Ragna lands several attacks on the enemy. After damaging the armor a bit, the blades get stuck in a crack in Terra Tectra's shoulder. The superior dragon then uses its own flaming blood to counterattack. Ragna acknowledges that the opponent is tough. He used all his power in the last strike, but couldn't cut off the dragon's arm. Terratectra praises the human's strength, but Ragna refuses the admiration. Descending near the enemy, he releases one of the swords and takes off the glove from his right hand, determined to defeat this opponent in the next attack. Regardless of what the dragon will do, the boy intends to crush its magic and win, but he needs a high amount of silverine to do so. The problem is that his silverine battle art is dormant in his body for now, so he needs to create another power source outside his body, becoming one with the sword. The blade starts emanating an immense aura of power. Understanding the human's action, Terratectra prepares to use all its strength as well, intending to see which attack will prove superior in this showdown. Ragna then uses the Dragon Slayer attack, Flash of the Hunt, while the opponent uses the Seismic Cannon. The blows collide, causing an absurd shockwave. While this battle is taking place, Steria is using her power strategically, delegating power to others for greater utility. We see the arm team flying with silver pieces as if they were the Silver Surfer. Ultozora is impressed with the aerial units. The twins use their enhanced visions to provide information on the enemy's positions, seeing kilometers away even at night. The mines report about the horde of about 1,000 dragons surrounding the base and confirm that the total number of enemies is around 10,000, as predicted earlier. Further away is a more destroyed area where Ragna and Terratectra are fighting. However, they can't find Ultozora. In any case, all this information is impressive not only for their far-reaching vision, but also for their ability to communicate directly with anyone at a distance, updating the entire team on the situation outside. They mention that there are more than 1,500 humans in the area and 2 hordes are approaching the east entrance, totaling 400, possibly waiting for the brigade's attack. But for the princess, that doesn't matter because that's exactly what she wants. Meanwhile, Ultozora uses distant eyes to see the human situation, discovering that the first sent horde has been annihilated. The situation is tense for the soldiers who had to face the zombified humans, but Steria just wants a chance to vent her anger. This is when the impact of the attacks between Terratectra and Ragna occurs. Ultozora is worried, but the armored dragon says it's okay, declaring victory while we see Ragna fallen with Mr. Slime trying to wake him up. Regardless, it's astonishing that a human went head-to-head with Terratectra, who says that despite still being able to fight, it won't be able to use magic for a while after using the Seismic Cannon. Ultozora asks if there was silverine emanating from the human's body, and Terratectra responds that if the opponent had such power, they would have used it. They conclude that this isn't the Reaper who tried to end the progenitor, but Terratectra emphasizes that this enemy may still be on the battlefield, so they shouldn't let their guard down. At Ultozora's suggestion, he tries to take the opportunity to finish the guy off at once by stepping on him with his giant foot, but Ragna escapes at the last moment, surprising the dragons by still being alive. It turns out he survived by transferring the consciousness of his body from the human part to the sword part, so the battle is not over. Some lower dragons appear, whom the boy defeats in an instant. Terratectra says he's not as big of a threat now, and with a sufficient number of smaller enemies, he will be overcome and eliminated at some point. Before the superior dragon departs, Ragna, facing the inferior ones, asks him to wait and questions if they won't converse anymore through their fighting prowess. The big guy then says they've talked enough for him to understand that the kid is stronger than him. Well, he would be if the sword could withstand the power of his technique. Terratectra bids farewell, calling Ragna the man with no name, while receiving new instructions from comrade Ultozora, directing him to the princess's location. Ragna hasn't given up and starts cutting through the inferior dragons, trying to make his way to the superior dragon. The problem is, he's exhausted and heavily wounded, eventually dropping to his knees as hordes of inferior dragons keep increasing, until Shin appears and saves the guy by eliminating the creatures. Next, the soldier pulls Ragna by the collar and questions why he's on his knees. Garm also appears, prompting Ragna to ask why they are in the midst of enemies when they should be defending the base. However, the conversation is interrupted by a dragon attack. The warriors face off against some of these monsters. Now they continue fighting while the old man explains that they haven't abandoned the base. Most entrances have been blocked, so the only way for the enemy now is the north entrance, where Ike's team is, while the princess fights alongside 200 soldiers. Shin states that considering all this, he and Garm came to help Ragna, but the guy insists he doesn't need them and tells them to leave. They continue facing the creatures while Shin calls Ragna stupid for refusing help, but the guy just doesn't want people to keep going from the base in his place. Before finishing his response, the young man slips and falls from the back of the frozen dragon. Shin uses a powerful skill to get rid of several dragons around and approach Ragna. The discussion continues with Ragna insisting on doing everything alone and confirming to Shin that he wants them to hide while he takes care of things. So the Silver Brigade soldier takes a few steps back and says that in the last 2 days, he challenged Ragna 69 times and lost every fight, so now it's time for challenge number 70. He recalls a statement from the princess a few days before Ragna's arrival. She talked about relocating civilians out of the country and avoiding confrontation with superior dragons at all costs. Shin protested because he didn't want to flee the fight, stating he would eliminate as many dragons as possible because he wasn't afraid of losing his life in battle. However, Steria asked how many dragons he would defeat. He wasn't sure, but it would be as many as he could. With that, she asked if he could take down a superior dragon. This left him astonished, and she continued, saying that no matter how many weak dragons he defeated, it wouldn't make a difference. What she needed was to deal with the superior dragons. If she could, she would barbecue those creatures, ending with a punch, stating that he talks too big for a short guy. She had mentioned he's still in the growth phase, so she said he could prove that if he survives this situation. The princess then addressed everyone, saying that after the escape, she would join the Solarians using their power to end the winged lineage and would need those soldiers by her side when the day came, asking them to follow her in this plan. Still in flashback mode, half a day passes and everyone thinks about what the princess said. Shin talks to a soldier named Hugo Robles, who says he has family in Donapieru, the first city attacked by dragons. It might be too late, but he has to go back there, so Hugo says that Shin must become the new master swordsman, even though the boy hasn't said if he'll stay or not. Hugo says that if he wants to become stronger, he needs to survive. With that, 120 of the 470 force members decided to stay in the country. In the present, while fighting with Ragna, Shin wonders if they are still alive and if they managed to protect something. He can't know, and in fact, it doesn't matter because he chose to escape. When a short guy finally surrenders to Ragna, the score changes to 69-1, marking his first victory. Then he pulls the guy by the hair to say that this is their battle, between those who chose to flee to survive and the dragons wanting to exterminate them. No matter how strong this guy is or the reason he fights, he can't just show up later and act like a big hero. Ending the conversation, the old man has already cleared the area around them. He starts boasting about wanting to get stronger, but Mr. Slime draws their attention not to lose focus because the eruption dragon escaped and they need to go after it. So they walk away, with Shin planning to hunt and eliminate the 5th seat of the lineage. Meanwhile, the princess creates a cage of magic barriers, questioning if Ulto Zora thought he would have an advantage in the forest where she can simply turn the forest into her territory. The twin is warned that the ground dragons have retreated and no aerial shooter was lost. On the ground, damages were minimal, and the soldiers remain willing to fight. With this small victory, the magic circle is doing well, mainly because they added a vertical dimension to level everything. For the princess, the biggest advantage is that they don't need to win, just survive to gather enough energy from the defeated dragons to use in the teleportation magic. The problem is that Ulto Zora has analyzed the princess well, both her extraordinary actions in this battle and what has been recorded about her. The dragon knows that she wouldn't risk the citizens' lives in a senseless battle, so he has figured out her intention, which is to use the magic absorption circle to take the energy from the eliminated dragons and use it for teleportation magic. Ulto Zora knows this because when he was part of the Solarians, they were studying how to use dragon energy in combat, and now he's seeing the studies being successfully implemented. In short, he knows exactly the human's plan. Princess Steria possesses an incredible ocular ability. It's not any Byakugan, but she can perceive the aura emitted by all of creation. Dragons, however, lack this aura, but that doesn't mean Steria can't recognize these creatures. She perceives them as dark masses, contrasting with the natural brilliance of the world. Thus, she can identify the dragons. The problem is that the forest she's in has become draconic and everything around has turned completely dark. In this place, the princess can't perceive the movement of the dragons. As a result, the movement of people under Ulto Zora's control made her realize something was wrong. Steria notices a strange pattern in the movement of zombies and quickly understands that it's not random. The superior dragon already knows that only humans can be teleported within the magical circle's area, at least that's how he interpreted it. So the strategy is to have the zombified humans fill that area to increase the magic needed for teleportation since, in a way, they are still human. Thus, the princess's strategy is compromised for now. Despite these adversities, the princess prefers not to act clueless and remains resolute. An unnoticed dragon attempts a fire attack, but Steria uses a magical barrier to protect herself and her followers. Nevertheless, the power is impressive because it comes from a dragon that has lived long enough to become experienced. These inferior and median dragons can learn some of the spells of the mature dragons that created them. The princess asks if the Smekbers can aim from above, but the aerial support is occupied with several small tornadoes created by other dragons. To Ulto Zora, mature dragons are the perfect pawns of the lineage, as dozens of elite hunters would need to unite to defeat just one of them, and at the moment, they have about 40. The superior dragon feels quite content with this situation. The advantage is clear. When Steria tries to attack a nearby enemy dragon, another smaller one uses a barrier spell to stop the attack. This protective barrier doesn't allow anything from outside to pass through, but it allows anything from inside to pass out without any problem. Meanwhile, Obliterate calculates that the magic absorption area of the circle is 2 kilometers, something that surpasses the magical capabilities a country like this could normally create on its own. Therefore, it's clear that there is something more behind all of this. The superior dragon recalls Nebula mentioning not seeing the face, but there was a woman with white hair and a black dress who used a magic perhaps more powerful than his own barrier magic. Despite being in the advantage, Obliterate is not counting on victory yet because several things have happened beyond expectations, and the tide can turn in an instant depending on what might happen next. After all, even if the battle is won, it would be a defeat for them if the princess escapes. There's the possibility of her realizing that there's no chance of victory and abandoning the civilians, activating the teleportation magic. For a definitive victory, they need to take control of the magical circle at the base. Meanwhile, Ike faces a complicated moment while defending the base. He realizes that all the soldiers on the front line were suddenly eliminated. He didn't even see how it happened despite keeping an eye on them the whole time. The current enemy is a white dragon with purple eyes, which when opened makes all magical defense grids disappear. The creature approaches while Ike can only try to decipher what's happening. Regardless, knowing that even though small, this must be a mature dragon, Ike orders the men to fall back to the second line of defense and requests support from the marksman. Only now does he remember a warning from Crimson about the Monarch ultimation being able to control time, and that mature dragons would surely replicate this ability in this battle. That's exactly what's happening, and the creature not only stops time but also releases powerful energy bursts, wiping out several soldiers at once and knocking Ike to the ground. Not sure of what's happening, Ike doesn't know how to deal with this type of enemy, but remembers that the princess left him in charge of the base. So he starts going on the offensive, imagining that the dragon's power has a time limit. Otherwise, he would have been eliminated already. He also thinks that the creature needs some time before using the power again, so time to attack is now before the creature can stop time again. After a leap, Ike uses the sword to defend against some energy bursts and almost lands a precise blow, but the dragon manages to dodge, leaving only a silver mark on its shoulder. Before the monster stops time again, Crimson confuses it, appearing out of nowhere and making the creature think he is the monarch. The mage throws a spherical grenade in the air, and still confused, the dragon decides to stop time. But this turns out to be its worst mistake, since as soon as time stops, the magical grenade activates, emitting a good amount of sunlight, burning the dragon completely. With the creature eliminated, time starts passing again, while Ike and the others are confused and somewhat blinded too. Crimson explains the magical grenade, which is a weapon that emits accumulated sunlight, but this one was modified to explode automatically when it detected that time had stopped. And that's precisely what makes it so effective, because with time stopped, the dragon continues to be burned by the sunlight, as a normal grenade would just explode and end the effect immediately. The agony prevents the creatures from thinking straight, and they end up not being able to process what's happening. Crimson then mentions that to defeat an enemy that stops time is necessary to turn the static world into an unbearable hell. At least that's the simplest way. At this moment, Ike notices other people on the scene, who are the 1,500 citizens who were under the brigade's protection. They told Crimson that they didn't want to stand still while the soldiers fought alone, so the mage felt touched and equipped them with weapons. But of course, with this redhead, there's always something behind it. These people are hypnotized, and Crimson does the same with Ike and the other soldiers so that they think everything is fine, because the mage already knows that Obliterate has figured out the teleportation plan and placed the zombies in the circle area to double the amount of magic needed. Therefore, for Crimson, the best way out is to have the hypnotized face the zombified to reduce the number of humans in the effect area. Meanwhile, the 13th member of the lineage Urshgorun is tearing down walls in an attempt to bypass the barriers on the way to the base. However, he can't succeed, so he starts shouting in frustration. Unluckily for him, the noise bothers Fu, who is dealing with stress due to insomnia. Fu prepares to launch an attack while recalling the conversation with the princess about needing nearly 18,000 lesser dragons to activate the magic. The number is concerning, but the guy explains that defeating medium or mature dragons would bring dozens or even hundreds of times more magical power to the circle. Finally, he informs that he will take a nap when the fight begins. Having said that, in the present, Fu defeats Urshgorun in the blink of an eye, using the power of his right arm, and absorbs all the dragon's magical energy. He feels satisfied for having taken down this enemy before losing control. The problem is that Majorca and the others start beating him up to regain consciousness, claiming that he had lost control of his arm. Apparently, it was just Majorca's plan to get rid of her colleague and take his place in the hierarchy. Meanwhile, Crimson is impressed with Fu's power and gains significant interest in the brigade, wanting to take control of them with minimal damage. At this moment, the roots break down a few more walls and civilians defend themselves with the weapons provided by Crimson. Few is confused by the presence of civilians and the weapons, but Crimson is more concerned about the pressure from the forest that is beginning to overcome the princess's barriers. They need to strengthen the magical circle's defenses or it will be the end for humans. In the forest, the battle continues intensely. The twins face the wind powers of the dragons and some of the shooters are knocked down. Meanwhile, down below, the little dragon who created the barrier is quite happy with the situation. However, the shield is soon broken from above, and the creature begins to worry until being heavily struck by a warrior. At this moment, Zora realizes there was a miscalculation. He didn't anticipate that the princess would dispatch her troops to break the shield with their own strength instead of continuing to shoot from a distance. Thus, he concludes that the more insane the commander, the more insane his men. In the meantime, a warrior informs Steria that they have taken care of the fire-spitting dragon, but the other one with thorns is not around. She suggests he is probably on the cliff. She is ready to dispatch the troops again when the wind dragons start attacking from above after overcoming the brigade's air force. Zora considers it normal for the princess to remain at a disadvantage due to her lack of experience in large-scale battles. In this case, she commanded the defense and attack with an overwhelming disadvantage without realizing how it could quickly exhaust her. Thus, it is proven that being able to do anything one focuses on can have its disadvantages. The superior dragon, despite enjoying himself, considers the party over. However, Terratectra warns about something about 300 meters behind him. Checking for himself, Zora sees Ragna and the others advancing fiercely, while Terratectra reports losing a third of the platoon. Of course, if they continue pressing for numerical advantage, they will eventually win, but the number needed to do so is larger than expected. Meanwhile, the guys keep advancing with no time to catch their breath. Garm acknowledges that they can't even get close to Terratectra due to the overwhelming number of enemies in the way. However, despite the circumstances, Ragna won't give up. He continues advancing with determination. Shin simply can't understand how the guy remains firm even in these conditions, almost crawling, but this serves as motivation for him to continue as well. Inside, Ragna is suffering a lot. He can't breathe, feels pain, cold, and the urge to stop, but he knows he can't give up now. He needs to hunt Terratectra, Zora, and the horde of dragons to collect the magic. He wants to protect everyone on his own, so no one else has to lose their life. At this moment, he remembers what Shin said earlier about him not being able to just show up at the end and act like the big hero. Those words hit Ragna like a punch in the stomach. Anyway, he felt somewhat relieved to hear that, but future Ragna considers it a weakness because he always survived, always was the only one to remain alive. So he thinks he can only stay with people whose deaths won't hurt him or who won't die either. When the three stop in front of another group of dragons, Ragna resumes fighting impressively, taking down all the creatures alone. As always, this surprises the other two, as even with one foot in the grave, he continues with insanely effective techniques. At this moment, Zora realizes he made a miscalculation, but that's something that can happen on the battlefield from time to time, persistence. On the other hand, Ragna feels something strange, a sense of despair as defeat seems certain. This is common for future Ragna, and at this moment, more than ever, Ragna feels the proximity of his future self, and to him, that is like returning to hell. Ragna has already learned that the aura flowing through everything in this world does not flow dragons. Instead of this aura, they possess magical power, something beyond that alters this world, and that's why Silverine exists. The world created this power to resist the transformative powers of magic. While Ragna reflects, enemies approach. With half a second left before the nearest target reaches him, he uses this time to refine Silverine's freezing ability. Ragna then advances to launch the attack, knowing that he only needs one sword movement to defeat his prey. He also understands that Silverine's battle art is not the only thing that made the future Ragna so powerful. There's also what he learned from experience, the ability to survive at battle. Imagination is essential. It's hard to accept that all this happened in just half a second, but let's assume the guy has an ultra-fast thought process. Next, Ragna moves the sword forward, and from the blade's tip emanates a large amount of Silverine, freezing and eliminating all advancing dragons at once. He does all this with the thought that he only needs to mentally visualize the attack's result for everything to happen. And thus he remembers, while facing another group of dragons, that for him, moving a sword is like conjuring the image of a dragon-free future and bringing it into reality. Meanwhile, Terratectra also has his reflections. He knows that when enemies become persistent, they also become more resistant, spreading to others around. Zora agrees but says it doesn't matter how much they endure because the princess is already on her last legs, as we can see. The poor thing needs protection because of her injuries. Steria decides to head northwest, so the blonde soldier picks her up and carries her on his shoulder. Besides knowing the princess's condition, Ultozora reveals that he sent Platinum Tyra to attack the base, the one that stopped time, but he can no longer communicate telepathically with her, and Terratectra is also not hearing anything from Goron anymore. Ultozora wonders if they were defeated while receiving information about the air squadrons being shot down as well. The most impressive thing for him is the base defeating the 13th and an elite mature dragon so quickly. Confirming that there are 5 minutes left for Terratectra's magic to recharge, Ultozora determines that this is the time the brigade still has to survive. He says he will deal with the soldiers outside and the ones who brought down the air squadron and asks his colleague to notify when he's ready. Terratectra asks